I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order on Tuesday, January 7th, 2025 at 2:30 p.m. Roll call. Bell?
Here.
Berto here. Hausen here. I would like to move comments, correspondence, and concerns from the public after this CLA presentation because we only have them for a certain amount of time. With that being said, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Motion by Hausen, second by Bell. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from December 10th, 2024?
So I'll make sure. Second.
Motion by Hausen, second by Bell. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Okay, discussion action items. 6A, CLA presentation, debt and the budget process. Amber?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So I think Denise, did you have some specific questions to start? Or did anybody have specific questions to start?
I only have one.
Okay.
And that is the TIF that's expiring in 2028.
Mm-hmm.
When that expires, what happens to the money? I need clarification.
So when the TID closes, what happens is there'll be a final closeout. If there's any funds remaining in the TID, that gets dispersed between the taxing jurisdictions based off of typically like a value calculation of what each taxing jurisdiction has within those boundaries. And then if there is not any, which if it ends in 2028, that's the current projection, is that it's going to be short to recover all of the eligible reimbursable costs. Those funds are funds that have already been dispersed from the utilities, capital projects, general fund, and debt service. And those are going to be, I'm going to say, lost expenses to be recovered from those funds. The debt service, and Justin, I see Justin is on the call. I believe the debt service for the TID goes through the closing of the year. I don't have that on me, but the debt would then be paid off at that point. And I believe it's scheduled that way. But currently, I believe the initial projections are right now at 2023, it was about $8.6 million of eligible reimbursable costs to be recovered yet. And based on initial projections, might come within, depending on values, I'm going to say within the $3 million range, but that could change and different projections could show something different. If there's an extension on the TID, then obviously more can be recovered and will minimize the amount of unreimbursed project costs that have already been spent by as I mentioned, the capital projects, debt service, general fund, and utilities.
Okay, so you don't anticipate us having any money left over in the TID that would be dispersed to all the taxing jurisdictions, right? Because
not at this point.
Okay, thank you. So there's no money most likely coming back to the village. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
No, the only thing that I would anticipate at this point coming back to the village would be through the repayment of those eligible project costs. Through the debt service repayment, which is scheduled to be repaid first, and then capital projects and general fund, and then utilities. So likely that all of those will not be repaid. Again, values can have an impact on that. If there's an extension, can have an impact on that. But as of right now, and only looking through 2028, looks like it would not be enough to recover all of those costs.
And we kind of knew that going in because it was a slow
Yes.
start. So,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
That's not
And
new.
actually, the projections look a lot better than what they used to. So,
Right. Okay, thank you for that, Amber.
I have a follow-up question on that. Amber, if there was money left over, based on recent state law, that could be put towards affordable housing, couldn't it?
you would have to qualify for that affordable housing extension. The state would have to approve that. And then if there was, the entire increment has to be used for that. The entire last increment has to be used for that. So the final increment.
Why would we or would we not extend the TID?
Typically, it's going to depend on what those unreimbursed project costs are and where those. So in your case, what funds have to be repaid, because a lot of that's cash out the door. And then the next piece is what kind of value are you putting back on your tax roll? Are the two situations that you would look at, and what makes the most sense at that time.
And if we did apply for an extension, it's a max of 3 years, am I correct?
I do not have that in front of me right now. I want to say it's 3 or 4. I'm not sure, Justin, if you know that. The affordable housing is one, but then there's different types that you could qualify for, and I want to say there's 3 or 4.
And the decision to extend that, we wouldn't make that for a couple of years yet, because we wouldn't have all the details on the implications.
I would agree with that statement. But the only thing you would have to check is the deadline to file those extensions. But yes.
So typically that's done like the year before. You're saying look at what the deadline is. That's when you have to look at making the decision.
Yes, I would have to look at the DOR requirements for when those extensions have to be filed. But then yes, you would want to make sure that maybe have a good idea of what those values are. I think there was a significant increase now here in 24 from a value standpoint in the TID because of some projects that were done, some the reevaluation and so forth. And if you're at the end of the expenditure period, so the project expenditures really shouldn't change. There really shouldn't be any. It should really just be debt repayment. But you could have value changes over the next couple of years.
And there's I think you said there was 2 mechanisms you can use to extend it. Either you can do a full audit or some sort of audit, or you can just go to the TID board.
So there is the the extension that Adam had mentioned. That one is you can go through the process of a TID audit, confirming that there is still eligible expenditures to be repaid, and then the joint review board really, I believe they really don't have an option, but they can use that as an extension. And then, or if you have a good standing with your joint review board, you can kind of use the reports that have been filed every year. So the P300s and we include an unreimbursed project cost report in your reports, that you'd be able to look at that and see, okay, this has not been repaid. Yeah, we should extend this. And then you could use that for the extension period. You have to file. So you have to do a audit at the end of the expenditure period, which we have that nearly complete. And then you have to do an audit at the end of the life of the TID at that point, regardless. So what Adam was referring to was slightly different to confirm it, but I think that answers your question, Nate. And
it does. And I guess what I was getting at is it's not, we don't just look and say this is the deadline, we have to do it at this point. We have to do it. There's a number of things we have to do ahead of that deadline. So
yes, there are things that.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute myself, so now I can. Absolutely correct. So the way it works is there's two options. You either have to do an unaudit. You can go in front of your joint review board and show them projections that show you will not be able to essentially recoup the costs without the extension. Or if you do what's called an independent audit, as Amber was alluding to, and that basically is verified that you need this extension in order to recoup those costs, then the joint review board is statutorily obligated to approve your 3-year extension. So there's some municipalities that do it kind of different ways, depending on their relationship. If they feel, they'll just go in and show them kind of the projections and the performas and kind of their financial information. Or if they want to make sure that it has to get approved, they'll do an independent, they'll ask their auditor to basically verify that information and put something in writing and then submit that. And then that allows you to do it. The affordable housing is the same thing. You are allowed basically to do a 1-year extension for affordable housing. That does not have to go through the joint review board. That actually is approved by the village board. And then the requirements are that 75% of that increment that's generated that you capture has to go towards what is considered affordable housing. And then 25% of that can go towards any type of housing. So it can go towards any type of initiative that actually would improve the housing availability of Sister Bay.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I think I just wanted to touch base and kind of clarify. I think at the last meeting we talked about where if the village were to refile the taxes, what would that look like? How do you do that? So what that means is the operational levy, and let me see if I can. Heidi, am I able to share my screen?
Unfortunately, I have lost the ability to do a lot of things with Zoom today. So, is it something
Okay.
you can tell me, Amber, and I could show for you?
I was just gonna look at the levy limit worksheet, but let me see if I can talk about this and if there's questions, I can always send a snip. But so the DOR that Vlad had followed up with, the DOR, and what I had said is that your operational levy. So what I'm going to say, maybe let me put it in these terms. Your allowable levy, excluding debt, you are really restricted by your net new construction. So your net new construction was 2.5%, I believe, in 2024. Your actual total levy, your total allowable levy for the village, not the TID increment, for the village, went up 1%. So about $31,000. You held your debt, you increased on the levy about $300,000. That was intentional in how the projections laid out and what has been worked on with Justin and Baird on how that looks. What that does is your total levy that goes into your general fund and your capital projects has stayed about the same. So what that's changing is just your debt service. If you reduce the amount of your debt service amount on your levy, that means that in order to pay that P&I, so the principal and interest, you either have to use your cash on hand in your debt service fund, which there's a little bit there from some refinancings and so forth. Not enough from a long-term perspective, but a year or two maybe. 2 years tops, I would say probably, but you have about a year that you could use that cash on hand in the debt service, or you would have to transfer from your general fund to cover that principal and interest. In order to keep your general fund whole, to make your payrolls, to make maintenance, do all of that, you would then, at that point, reduce your capital projects levy. What that has an impact on is that means if you have capital projects that are of important need that need to be done, if you have street projects and so forth, you're forced into a borrowing situation and don't necessarily have the cash to offset that. I have some communities that do that. Bond rating agencies look at that a little bit differently. And I'll let Adam or Justin talk about that, but that's where the ultimate circle kind of comes into play. The only way that you could really reduce your taxes is to adjust that debt service adjustment line on your levy limit worksheet. And that's the impact it has, because your general fund, you could use some unassigned fund balance, but your percentage is already at, I believe it's like 35%. That's a healthy range. If you continue to pull from that, or you pull from it, I should say, to restore that becomes difficult. And that's the decision that would have to be made.
Well,
I don't know, Heidi, do you?
I'm not interested in playing around with our debt levy at all. We have worked really, really hard this last decade working towards this goal, and it literally makes no sense. What I am looking at is reducing our capital improvement plan and keeping that somewhat steady, and reducing our levy for CIP by about $400,000. And this isn't just for 1 year. This is for about the next 4 years. I went through our CIP, made a whole bunch of adjustments. The committee got, and I just did this yesterday with Vlad and Adam. We got the printouts today. We will be going through that. But I think that's how we can pull back, spread out some of the vehicles, the equipment, and things of that nature, get another year or two out of them, and reduce our CIP levy. That's how I am envisioning moving forward, and not touching that debt levy at all, because it has been structured to allow us to move forward.
So unfortunately, the way that it works is, in order to reduce that capital levy, it would have to reduce that adjustment line on the levy limit worksheet. So the way that you would then adjust for that is that reduction in the capital projects levy would have to then be transferred out of to kind of offset that. You would have the same reduction in the capital projects as you do in the debt levy, and you would have to move that from the general fund to the debt service. Because if you reduce your allowable levy, excluding the debt, you cannot get that back. So say your net new construction is 0%,
Right.
you are stuck. So your general fund would, and because part of your general fund levy goes into your capital projects, that's where that number's coming from. You would not be able to increase that ever again, until your net new construction catches up, which that could be forever. So that's like that 2.5% that I referenced. That's all you can increase. So the roundabout way to do that is through that adjustment line. And it still does, Denise, what you're saying, but it's messy.
I know it's messy, and I know that it really binds us. But we have been, when we decided to deplete every account of cash, when we were buying the waterfront property, when we were doing the upgrades to the beach and everything else like that, that was a conscious decision. We knew that it was going to strap us for a multitude of years, that we would not be able to do other projects. Hence, all of these projects are kind of coming to fruition now because we have worked ourselves out of that. Have a great way to pay for debt that stays flat. So I know the repercussions of what I'm talking about, but I cannot, I personally cannot come up with another way to let our constituents know that we hear you, that we're trying to do something. Because I don't think I can go back and say, well, if we do this, we're really sticking it to ourselves, and that they won't care.
Yeah, and I think you have some options in that debt, and I think Adam, you and I talked about this. I think
Yep.
in that reduction about, you kind of have the flexibility. Say you want to get to a certain point over say the next 3 years, and you could incrementally reduce that over time as well. I believe one of the spreadsheets we just used your 2025 budget spreadsheet, and we plugged in some adjustments, and say we drop that debt levy by 300,000, and just what that percent does. You have some flexibility in there in terms of what you could do. It's just how it looks on paper and how you do it in reality. It gets you to that same answer, Denise, of you're ultimately going to pull back some of that capital. But the question then that I think the village has to ask is, how much is what you want to do incrementally, X amount per year. That's up to the village to decide on that. But the way, from my perspective, the way that you do it is through that adjustment line, and we can help from the reporting perspective on what that looks like. But really making sure that you're keeping that what's in your general fund from a tax levy perspective to pay for operations is really what we need to make sure that you have there. Does that help, Denise? I think it's the same thing of what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't think I have the I have the TID in, TID out, the mill rate worksheet, the tax increment worksheet, but I don't think I have the worksheet that you're referencing. Do I?
You could email it to us now. We could all access it.
The levy limit worksheet, Vlad, do you have that by chance?
Yeah, I'm gonna email.
He's looking for it, Amber.
Yeah, you can email it to all of us because we can all grab it.
I can see if I can. No, it's disabled yet. And as I mentioned, I think Vlad might also have this too. I just showed a comparison of the 2023 statement of taxes to the 2024 statement of taxes and what your total levy looks like. Your total levy, as I mentioned, went up about that 31,000 or 1%. So not a whole lot of inflation is 3.5% compared to the 1% that the village levy went up for operational purposes, which includes the general fund, capital projects, and debt service. So that's all of those.
Amber, do I understand that correctly? That, okay, so we're not keeping up with inflation. Does that mean that we're gonna potentially run into issues later on And I'm specifically thinking of like in the Parks Department, you know, if they're not budgeting enough for gas or whatever, their service, utility bills, et cetera, because they're not keeping up with inflation. Is there the risk of falling short or not having enough money in there?
It could depend on, obviously, it depends on what line items are budgeted at where. I'm not looking at a budget to actual right now.
Yeah.
So I
and
can't, so I
so
can't clarify
some,
that, but
some of that,
you're gonna
Julie,
eventually have that risk, and then you're gonna pull from, what's gonna happen is it's gonna come from your unassigned fund balance, which is that 35% that I referenced.
or Julie, you're going to have to, that's going to be conversations obviously through the budget process then with the board and understanding, you know, you are levying, as kind of Denise alluded to, there's money currently that is in your levy that is related to capital projects. Well, if you have to obviously increase the operational side, then there's the discussions of you're either further reducing the capital levy side and shifting that to a borrowing, which is what's happening to a lot of municipalities, as I think Amber alluded to, they may at one point in time had a capital levy, but due to inflation and because of that new construction not allowing you to increase your levy to account for that, a lot of municipalities then dipped into their, you know, basically their capital improvement levy, shifted that over to operations and moved what they needed to do from a capital improvement standpoint to either debt, or they're not doing those projects, or just as you alluded to, Julie, you are continually, you know, deferring those maintenance items, and it's getting worse and worse. And then that causes the conversation of referendums.
Which is a good reason not to reduce the capital improvement plan by too much.
I think there's a balance of what
Right.
that looks like, and I think you'd want to balance need versus want. And Denise, I think you mentioned this about maybe delaying some things and figuring out, okay, what can we delay, what can't we, and what's going to cost us more if we delay, what's not going to cost us more. And sometimes you might hit on it, you might not, but at least thinking about or going through that process, that's really where it starts of trying to find that balancing act, because it's not a straight answer. So
But did you
let
find
me,
Yeah.
Heidi, did you have your levy limit worksheet up?
Yep, I got off of it for just a quick second, so let me get back there and you tell me which page to be on.
Do you by chance have the statement of taxes?
Vlad's gonna look that up.
So let me, if you can scroll to the next page. So
The
this
bottom
is
there?
the, up a little bit.
What section
This
are you looking at?
section D. So
Section
this
D.
section here. This section is what the village, I'm going to say, can use to control the levy if it pertains to the village. It may or may not. The most common item is line item E, debt service for general obligation debt authorized after 2005. That number is what you can use to balance your levy to stay level. So stay level by meaning you're not having significant increases in mill rates and so forth from an operational standpoint, not including the TID. Okay, this number does not include the TID. It's very important. If you go to the previous page, if you go up a little bit, so this will give you what your actual total allowable levy is. The reason I asked for the statement of taxes is I want to compare the actual levy, not the allowable. This gives you the allowable. The total amount allowed is $3,433,000 based off of the 2025 debt service payments put in, but it also reduces the 2024 debt service payments. So line 3 and line 9, those get netted. That's a change of only $675. So that portion stayed level. Your net new construction that I mentioned, line 6, 2.5%. That's the increase that you're allowed by statute. So if you don't go to your net new construction amount and take that allowable amount, and depending what inflation is, you'd never have a chance to go back and take that. Okay? So if you want to pay your general fund, so your general fund, your operational costs, your general employee costs, general maintenance costs, and so forth, that comes out of that $2,588,000. Okay? The difference between that and the $3,400,000 is the debt service. That debt service amount cannot be used for anything else other than debt service. If that amount is reduced, that amount then is going to come out of your general fund because you still have to make your principal and interest payments. And this 850 does not represent the total principal and interest that you're actually paying. There's additional principal and interest that's being paid. Some of it might be through the room tax, some might be through some other revenue sources, and some might just be being used fund balance for. The village historically has not levied the full amount of the debt. But this is the calculation. All of this is kind of run through from the DOR with the exception of the debt number. That's the number the village has control over.
So basically with all these different worksheets and everything else like that, it's just one big tangled web of a mess.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Well, but it's not a mess though, right? I mean, it's organized, it makes sense, it's intertwined. You have to have debt in order to,
It's not simple to
Yes, that way.
understand. It
Yes.
is not
Correct.
simple to explain
Correct.
to
you can't just reduce one thing and think that you're solving a problem.
right.
Amber, is it fair to-
There's consequences to everything that we do.
Correct.
And it's not just next year that those consequences play out,
Correct.
it is. in
Yes.
perpetuity.
Correct.
Correct. Were you able to find the statement of taxes? Okay, so here's the statement of taxes. If you go to the next page, Heidi. If you scroll down, so right here, oops, sorry, let's scroll back up. Your total allowable levy that we just looked at on that levy limit worksheet was $3,433,000. The actual levy was actually only $3,410,000. So even though you were allowed to go up 2.5%, that's where I'm saying the village went up 1%. You didn't take your full maximum levy that you could just based off of the calculation in the levy limit worksheet, but then also there's some of that debt that may not be fully on the levy to begin with. So what that means is you're already going to at some point potentially at some point you're going to run into some tough decisions about if we're not increasing for inflation our levy. I can tell you construction costs are over inflation. That's where it comes down to what can we wait on, what can't we, what's going to cost us more in the long run, what do we need to do now? Those are the decisions that are the tough ones to make. And as Nate, you mentioned, it's not just next year. It's not just the year after. It's what happens 5 years from now. And that's hard to predict. We don't know what's going to happen.
Amber, by being frugal and not using the full percent we can, that hurts us in the long run, doesn't it?
It can. I don't want to say for sure it will because I can't predict that. But it puts you in a spot where you can't, with the levy limit laws and how that calculation comes up, you don't have a lot of flexibility. So you're relying on other cost savings, whether it be vacancies in in personnel, whether it be somebody maybe being on a single insurance plan versus a family, versus delayed maintenance, maybe, you know, some of those costs that are a little bit harder to predict. But it has, I mean, the village has saved some money in those ways over the last number of years as well. But that's what's helped build that fund balance. You're not going to build a fund balance by taking your full levy. You're going to cover your costs. Adam, if you have anything to add to that.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of this too goes into, I mean, this is the long-term planning, I think that Julie alluded to, and Vlad, with your budgets and your processes. But then it's also true the understanding of what the board and what you're trying to achieve as a village. And this is where, you know, if the goal is to have a, you know, flat essential taxes, that your taxes don't increase, that's where, you know, when I'm putting my old administrator hat on, you know, those are models where you can certainly do that for 1 year. But as Amber's alluding to, is when you do that, there are consequences that occur in the future. And that's what this refers to, is by not, you know, fully levying. When you fully levy, you know, if you're going to use your full levy, that does and can cause a increase in taxes because you're increasing over the previous year. So by, you know, staying flat, which sometimes you do have to do, that's where, as Amber alluded to, there's ramifications. It's considering into the future. That means that you're not sticking with inflation. And again, you may then need a higher net new construction in order to be able to get back to that, or eventually you're going to have to make decisions, which you're talking about, which is the capital improvement plan, where it's shifting or reducing costs, which then means either projects are getting deferred or you're moving those projects if they, you know, are truly needed and they have to be done. Then you're talking debt issuance. And it's, you know, as I think you alluded to, Julie, it's a web. And as Denise said, it's a lot of parts and pieces that all play together, that when you move one, it can move 5 in this direction. When you bring one down, it can cause these 4 areas to be considered. So it's a lot.
After spending many hours on the phone with both of you and a lot of time with Vlad, I've come to the conclusion that we need to try and cut what we can cut from the CIP and then have you come back and put it through this tortured system. I understand there's a methodology to it, but it is convoluted to the layperson. To myself, I'm just one of you guys too. I think that we need to try and cut whatever we can and then see where that leaves us moving forward over the next several years.
Well, when I was in Vlad's office and Adam, we were talking to him for about an hour, and Adam did some calculations, and with the TID, he figured out that, now granted, this is based on figures from our 2025 budget, okay? Things will change. There will be increases. There will be shifts in the CIP, et cetera. But with everything, if everything stayed the same, we should be shooting for a maximum levy of 3.8 million. So if on the 2024 tax increment worksheet, our apportioned levy was 3.4. With the TID, it was 4.2. So basically, if we reduce that 4.2 by 400,000, bringing us to 3.8 total, but that should somewhere be a goal of ours. If it doesn't affect something too drastically and have bad unintended consequences.
Which is what Adam talked about at the beginning of all this.
Right.
Don't mess with your debt. Don't mess with any of that. Just find a way to reduce the 400,000 from your CIP and everything will be fine. I think where the bigger question, or where it got hung up, is people were like, well, we want to refund money. We want to do this. Where it gets real sticky, and that's a whole nother issue.
looked at it,
Looked at what?
I'm sorry, when you looked at, and did, and calculated, we should.
Adam did that.
Sorry, I beg your pardon, when you worked with them, and came to 3.8, where was the 330,000 that we? in
We
property
weren't looking
taxes?
at 330,000.
That wasn't in there.
We were just calculating based on the budget that we adopted.
Gotcha.
If everything stayed
And
the
it-
same,
And it did.
he kept putting numbers in, get it to a certain place, and it came up at 3.8 million.
Okay.
So it had nothing to do with any specific anything.
Okay.
Just because I had asked what could we get to a goal number? What might that number be?
Mhm.
And then we could still have a TID surprise this year, but it would be much less because we've already accounted the big difference that we haven't accounted for in the past, for pretty much forever.
Okay.
Right.
Well, that was my question, whether there would be any variables that pop up, because they
Absolutely,
do.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think to Louise's kind of question, that's where, Vlad and I have talked about improvements that can be made in the budgetary workbooks to now account for the TIDs and look at that. And again, we can try to get it close, just as everybody alluded to on the committee. There's always going to be variables that you may not be able to control, but at least this will get you to a better, guesstimation point of where you think it's going to land. And it should be closer to where it's been in years past, not the fluctuation that you've seen over the last kind of 3 or 4 years.
Well, and we we had a roughly $1 million. How do I say this? Let me back up. There's a couple of projects in the TID out on 57 that that should see some work on them this year. Now,
2 big ones. For sure, construction.
right.
Too.
In
I
TID
don't
two,
know of anything else right now, but we would have a good understanding, just because it's on their building permit, doesn't mean that's exactly what it's gonna be. But what those costs are going to be, for net new construction, which we can't touch because it's in the TID. But what that TID number, would increase just because of those, and we are not having a reassessment until 26.
27.
Well, they do the work in
Right,
26.
underground, yeah, okay.
So I think now that we're aware and we know what projects are going on and where they're going on, I'm unaware of anything outside of a TID that's happening. So our net new construction this year could be minuscule, which
Well, define minuscule.
nothing.
well, if you have it at 0, your Heidi, if you show that levy limit worksheet again,
I mean, you will have, I guess I'm saying that we don't see anything. I was talking about commercial. Are there homes still being built that would be
I didn't
net
mean
new
that. I know.
construction?
I
Yes,
know,
but
I wasn't.
big
No, I didn't mean
value
that. I didn't mean-
projects.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, it closed on me. I'm getting to it.
no, that's okay. And I think all of that is, I do have to jump off here, so I just want to make sure that I finish this. But what you're going to adjust, so when Adam's talking about that, the line that you're going to adjust is that line 9 going forward. So like when you do your 2025, that's the number, that's the line item that you're going to have the ability to, I'm going to say, play with. Okay. It's probably, Adam, that's probably the best explanation
Probably.
of what you're going to be able to play with to get to the number that you want to get to from that
Maneuver,
perspective.
right.
So that new construction, as you can see, that 2.5% here in this case brought you up a little bit over 50,000, maybe 60,000. If you bring that down to 1%, you're not seeing an allowable growth in your total allowable levy of very much at all. So Denise, to your point, that's going to stay very stable. So when we go to line 9, what you have control over, And that's with working with Adam and Barrett on your debt allocations, and that's where that line 9 comes into play, and what you're going to be able to have the ability to control from your capital improvement plan.
Thank you for your time, Amber. Extremely informational.
Thank you, Amber.
All of your
Yeah.
time in the last couple of weeks,
Thank you.
Yeah.
more than just.
Any other last questions? Think not. Adam's on yet for sure. I see, and I think
Mhm.
maybe Justin, and they might be able to answer any if there are. But
Thank you.
excellent. Thank you.
So did we also deal with B, tax levy considerations and recommendations? Was A and B kind of all wrapped up together? Or is that something else specific?
Well, I think, when we had talked about this together, it was, let's hear from, the consultants and then decide. Are we gonna do anything with this current tax year levy recommendations? How are you gonna handle that? Cause that's another issue, if you're spending $50,000 to refund $330,000, is it worth it? Those are questions we have to have. I think while we have Adam and Justin, maybe have them explain more about. I'd like the public to hear how the debt works, because I think people think it's bad to have debt. We've been through this before, but I mean, you have to be healthy and in a good financial position, you have to have a degree of debt. I mean, if you never have debt and you have an emergency, you're not gonna get a loan. You're gonna have a hard time getting a loan. Or getting good rates on it is one. You look at your bond rating, we want the bond proceeds to pay for projects. We don't want to get things so run down that they're like we did with the Parks building, where we're paying 4 million for something that we projected to be 2 million. Or just kind of scenarios like that. And I know people think I'm biased on it, but I'm just trying to make sure that we're not running into a hole or a situation where, you delay something and you're doing more damage by delaying it. And Justin, maybe, or Adam, Justin, I think you're probably the best one for that one. I'm not sure, because you've been working with the debt calendar, but maybe just walk us through again.
Oh.
The debt, is it good or bad? And at what point does it become bad? And what do we have to look out for here?
Heidi, do you have the ability to unmute Justin? He's having the same issue I had where we couldn't unmute ourselves. There he is.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Here, I'm in my car, but yeah, I thank you for having me on today, and all good questions, good discussion. Yeah, this is something that as Denise kind of alluded to earlier in this discussion, this is something that we've been planning for since almost 10 years ago. And we're to the point where we got the levy for the debt service to a point where we're able to do certain capital projects, the longer term, larger type projects, and those are going to be around for 20 years. So that's where you want to try to match up the useful life of those projects, because they're going to benefit, not only your constituents, but just the community as a whole for a long period of time. So that's why the cost is kind of spread out. Now you have the capital projects levy, and a lot of that is a lot more, shorter term type stuff. And that's great that you can fit that in there. We're not advocating for you to borrow for that. You have that ability. Absolutely put it under the capital projects levy if you can. Some of these larger projects, you don't have the funds to be able to do them, or it'll take a very long time to build up the funds to be able to pay for it in cash. And as you're doing that, as Julie just kind of mentioned, project costs do increase. We've seen it over the last several years. Every community I work with, one project started at X, and just because construction costs, I mean, you've seen it when you do a home renovation or anything, the costs have gone up over time. And so you're trying to kind of build up for it, but unfortunately, it ends up costing likely a higher amount. So that's where These specific projects being, the admin building and the Mill Road Triangle project, those are two larger projects that we have taken a look at and said those will likely be levy supported by the taxpayers. The other projects in the capital improvement plan, those, a lot of those should be funded by certain revenue sources. If it's marina, the marina hopefully could cover a lot of that debt service. And so kind of working towards that and not putting that on the taxpayers to pay for those type of items. So we've worked to a point where the debt you had on your books starting in 2017, it's been being paid down year over year. That's allowed you to get to a point where we felt like you were comfortable enough to be able to handle some of the projects without having your levy to the taxpayers jump up significantly. Because that was the main thing that I worked with Tasha on for many years is, there's these capital projects that need to be done, but how and when do we do them? And the village board has worked very hard, and Denise kind of mentioned it, to watch your spending over a long period of time. But the capital projects have also kind of built up over time at the same point. But we needed to pay down a lot of the existing debt to get in the position to do these future capital projects. So you've been able to do, the public works building. We did the broadband in last year. You've got 2 bond credit rating upgrades in the last 2 years, which is significant because the better the bond credit rating, the lower the interest rate you're going to receive, the lower debt payments you're going to be paying. Ultimately, it benefits your taxpayers to get, much better interest rates. And, because of that, when I showed the board in the fall of 2024, the preliminary financing plan to where we finished after we sold in the public market, it ended up being about $750,000 less in interest cost between the two projects from where we originally kind of projected. So, significant money to the taxpayers and that's why it's so important to have such a good, strong bond credit rating. And you've worked hard to get that and be in such a good financial position. And so now it's just, let's not try to go backwards. Let's continue to move forwards, but have a good, solid plan. And when we model these things out, there are always going to be assumptions. There's always going to be projections. But when we look at it going forward and we just kind of factor in the admin building for the $3 million and the Mill Road Triangle for $2 million and spread that debt over, the useful life of those projects, which is going to be about 20 years plus, hopefully on the admin building much longer. But legally in Wisconsin for general obligation debt, you can only go up to 20 years. So that would be spread out over that period of time. That's what allows us to keep that the levy, the debt service levy at the $850,000 or potentially a little less if there's no other capital projects in the future that need to be borrowed for. So we've gotten to a point we're able to do this. And yeah, no one loves to take on debt, but it's one of those tools that you have that's outside the levy limits. And that's the key thing is, Adam mentioned it, a lot of municipalities can't fit any capital projects under their current levy limits. They've just been squeezed out of it because their operational side has gone up, salaries and just general operations of running a community have gone up faster than the net new construction. And when that becomes a point in time where that gets depleted, that's where all the capital projects end up going towards, debt borrowing. And that's what a lot of municipalities are currently in. You're fortunately in that position where you're not there. You still have a nice capital project levy. Continue to utilize that. But at the same point, I think what Amber was making is, once you reduce that operational side, which includes the capital project levy, you can't go back. It's kind of, that's the new base. And then it's just from there going up from net new construction. And I kind of had to jump off for a little bit, so I don't know where that all ended up, but that's an important thing as you're deciding on what to do.
Anybody have questions for Justin?
Do we have a debt management policy now?
No, we've just used, finance, and the board has just kind of used common sense.
I'm just asking.
There's nothing in what Justin's, sent us, about that policy.
You just said a sample of one. from the
Right.
Community in the
Mhm.
state. I just wondered if we,
It's not anything that we haven't already done.
so we do have a debt management policy someplace in
No.
writing in the.
No.
We don't.
I'm saying,
Okay.
but it's the words on this paper,
Mhm.
the village over my 30 years has
Okay.
been,
Okay, I just didn't know if there was something, because it says the village should periodically review all outstanding debt to determine if savings can be achieved through refunding. I don't know what refunding means.
Yeah, that's a good question, Lucy. So refunding is when we would take a look at your outstanding debt and see if there's opportunities to refinance it at lower interest rates. And if there is an opportunity to capture at least 2% savings, that's when we would potentially pursue that refinancing opportunity. With interest rates where they are today and your outstanding debt that you have on your books, it doesn't make sense to refinance anything. But if you look or your 2017 debt issuance, which was part of the tax increment district number one debt, that was refinanced in 2017. That refinanced the 2011 bonds. And I can't recall off the top of my head, but I believe at that time it ended up saving several $100,000 by lowering the interest rates. You know, say they were at 4 or 5% interest rates. Right now they're at 2 to 3% interest rates. So at that time it made economic sense. And interest rates go up, they go down. It's just one of those things that, you know, if we go through another 2020, 2021 type time frame where interest rates drop again, you know, we'll obviously take a look at the debt and see if there's any opportunities. But at this point, there's nothing that makes economic sense to refinance.
Right, so just part of our best practice to take a look at that on an annual basis.
Mhm.
And one quick point I want to make on that 2017 debt, which is tied to the tax increment district number one debt, that has a call feature in 2027, and that was intentional. That means a call feature is when you can refinance or prepay it. It gives you the option on the bond. Knowing that that district was going to, you know, have a life of 2028, it gives us the ability at that time, if there's sufficient funds in the tax increment district, we can pay off that existing debt. So it doesn't necessarily have to go to 2031. If there's money in the district to pay off that debt and save a little bit more interest, that's what we would hope to do.
that is the loan though, that we have, that I think it's loan number 58. That is the lowest, it's 2.53%. According to my notes.
That's to number one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it based on what I have, it ranges in coupons right now from about 2% to 3%. The callable debt is at 3%. You know, it's going to be one of those where does it make more sense to keep the cash if you're earning more in investments at a higher rate, or do you pay off that debt? It's going to be, you know, we'll just have to evaluate when we get closer to that time frame.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else for Justin? Adam, are you gonna continue to hang around?
That is my plan.
Okay. All right, thank you, Justin. Carry on with your day. I think you were in the vehicle.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Before we move on to some general construction and reviewing the CIP, I said that we would go back to comments, correspondence, and concerns from the public. Does anybody want to say anything? Yes, Dick.
Dick Boros at 2340 Maple Drive in Sister Bay. I called Denise about 10 days ago, wanted to talk with her, and we did talk. During your previous meetings before Christmas and now, I've gone back to your minutes and gone through your minutes pretty extensively over the past 5 to 7 years. And while I'm very satisfied that there was no various action, which nobody has ever suggested by the board, I do think that we had some real misunderstanding here at the county level, or excuse me, at the village level. And when I came to the first meeting and talked about, well, let's move back a year. When we had the presentation that we had the significant increase with the reassessments, and the promises were made to no increases or very little increase to beyond it. So everybody, Amber talked about the 1% that the actual budget went up, but the taxpayers went up 10.8%. That's a fact. The taxpayers, I mean, they have to deal with that, and they don't know what's going to happen next year in TIF. And so, but if you remember, Denise, my concern as I spoke last time was the maintenance of the village. And I do understand the 2.5% net new construction because I worked with it for years at the county level. It was so significant at the county level that we had to propose on government days a new funding source for the county of Door, and that was to take public services out of the 2.5% levy, and we were successful in that. And they were able to draw emergency services out of that. And since then, they've drawn the percentage of the budget that emergency services utilizes in the law and in budgeting, et cetera. So it's significant money. So it's over $5 million at this time, if I understand it correctly. But the concern that I had and brought to you was the maintenance of the village, and that's what I'm hearing today. I'm hearing that even with good intention, last year, Denise you made the comment that you cut where you could, and we came in under net new construction, and I understood the ramifications of that. And that's what I'm fearful of. You know, next year, I think we're going to be bumping up against another, if I understand it correctly, a base, and then an additional increase on the two districts. So I'm not sure how the public is gonna fare in those discussions, and that's what you're up against. You have a taxing element here that you didn't anticipate, but it's very real for the next several years, and it's going to hurt you in your ability to move forward in what you have to do in the village. That's maintain the roads, maintain wage increases to your employees, maintain benefits, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think we can let any of that suffer. So the real issue I think that people have, and really, I think that the village is a bit tone deaf to some of what people are saying. I pulled up and I'm looking at the Park and Recs building, and I understand it's a 20-year building. But there isn't anyone I talked to in construction who said that they couldn't build that building for $2 million, a building that would be sufficient to the village's needs. And that's the biggest criticism I've heard. That being then the purchase of the property out at out at Lagerquist, and some of the shotgun approach to where things are going. And when I was here last, I asked for another group of people to analyze spending moving forward, and I understand there's consequences with that. And I don't know how you wrap your head around it now, because you have some obligations in your bond moving forward that reduce that, and it hurts you one way or another. But I do think the village, and the other part that people don't understand is the amounts, and I mentioned this as well, of revenues that we have generated and new revenues that we have taken on in the last 10 years. That, you know, the room tax, the Pratt tax, destination Door County money, the shared revenues that's now coming from the state of Wisconsin. And all of that hasn't seemed to help the village. I mean, I'm sure it has financially in the spreadsheets. But while others have maintained spending around us, we seem to be in a sea of spending and too many people just out of control. So I don't know what the solution is. I don't. But it's real and people are feeling it. And quite honestly, there's a lot of people that have moved in here that have houses that can tolerate significant tax increases. And then there are those who have lived here for a good amount of time, and even those who've moved here who are living and it makes them uncomfortable with the tax increases and the amount of spending that the village is doing. So I want you to know I do appreciate your efforts. Nate, Denise, you guys have worked hard, and I know that. But right now there's some very anxious people in the village, and I don't know what the answer is.
Can I comment back?
Sure,
Dick?
absolutely.
Let's have a conversation. I understand everything that you said, and I don't disagree with 99% of it. But what is difficult when you sit in this chair, and as I stated earlier, that when we did the waterfront, we didn't do anything. And we didn't do anything for a really, really long time because we were strapped. And our debt at that time, I can't remember on the graph that we had, with our borrowing capacity at the worst of it was extremely high. And we still, the board at that time, still knowingly went ahead because we felt that it was an investment in forever. I mean, once the village owned it, it was never not going to be owned by the village and be public. And so when Ken was on the board, we were saving money for a parks building. And slowly but surely, we were taken away at it. And then that account, along with many others, got wiped away to use as much cash as the village had to do the waterfront and to buy the property and things of that nature that we didn't have to borrow more. So the issue that I have is when people, and we got an email today, a repeated one that we get every month or so from the same person, that we are just spending wildly and we're drunken sailors, and that's what bothers me, because it's a lot of it's overdue because of it being put on hold. It's all coming at once. It's just like when we bought the Helms property and we thought that we were gonna have time to buy the Johnson property, and then boom. And it's like, you know, here's the hit that we didn't anticipate today, you know,
Let the marina pay for part of that.
you know,
Right.
down the line. So, and I understand, I mean, I pay taxes too. I don't necessarily love what they have my home assessed at. I know what I paid for it. But it's everywhere. It's not Sister Bay, it's not Door County, it's not the state of Wisconsin, it's the nation. And we have no control over assessments. I mean, that's Department of Revenue and how the assessors shake it all out and divvy it all up. We do have control over what we spend, no doubt. So what in all good conscience, and I've said at previous meetings, that you may not like the decisions that I have made or the votes one way or another that I have taken, but you will always know that I come from an informed position, trying to to do the best for the village. And I really hope that we continue to move forward with this administration building. I think that there's some in the Mill Road Triangle project. It's already built into our debt service. That has been planned out. If we do any other borrowing beyond that, it will make a difference negatively, on the taxes. So I would like to see us get through those two projects, move forward, do what we can with the CIP, push things out, and take a breath. And I'm hoping that there's a way that we can find to do that with no or minuscule increases. And so that's my goal. Whether or not anybody agrees with me on this committee or the board, that's a whole different story. But that is my goal moving forward. So I leave it out.
Can I respond to you and response to me, and then I'll speak. First of all, I do appreciate, and I don't think you're drunken sailors. I know some drunken sailors. You're not like these people. And I'll tell you something else. We are not overtaxed, and I'll get persecuted for that, but the average resident in Wisconsin is taxed at 1.51% of their property value. Wisconsin is the 41st state in the nation in rates of property tax, and it's at 1.51% as the average. We are not there. And my tax bill is approximately 1.02%, which, I mean, if you're looking at averages, that's fair, more than fair. But the point that I make is that, as I said, the beach property, all those purchases, and whether it's real or perceived, people hear things and see things coming out of meetings, and then they say, why aren't they maintaining the beach? And I think you're doing a pretty good job. You added on to the, but just the clumsiness of the beach and the sand ad and things like that. And over years, the board has been, the village has been, I've been on the board as well, criticized for purchasing something and then allowing it to fall into disarray as they move to purchase something else, or those types of things. And so I am fearful that the money that is about to be spent will detract from those projects that we, have put forth before. Can we do the maintenance on this building? Can we do the maintenance? Maintenance to these buildings are significant.
Yeah.
I believe that there'll probably be between the two buildings about $150,000 in overall maintenance and costs to run those two buildings annually. And so, I just ask that we would, for example, you peg the administrative building over here, you put the post office in Sister Bay. And I know that evaluation has been done. There's a lot of people who say now that post office isn't going to move and they're not going to move for 10 years. Is that correct? Or 4 years or whatever? Is that negotiation complete? I mean,
So we've never told the post office they had to leave. It's up to them. I actually had a conversation with them today and I said, look, we just want to make sure you stay here and provide service to our people. I said, if you feel you're better off somewhere else, we're okay with that, but we just want to make sure we don't lose you. And so they're
point that I
having
make
conversations
is
with other people.
there's a lot of people, and I say a lot, I don't necessarily include myself in this, but comment that let's put the administration building back in Sister Bay where it belongs in the current location of the original second fire station over there, the maintenance building. And there's room on there, and then that leaves that 40-acre parcel up there as you move forward in spending over the next 4 or 5 years, depending upon the TIFs. If you decide that you have to respend that, because we don't know, I don't think the cost and the evaluation of the rest of that property. Once you put the administration building up there, what's going to be the cost and what's going to be the eventual future of the initial 30 acres of that parcel and what cost of that. So is it best to leave that 40 acres sit for a while and put the administration back in the village where it's useful, and people can walk to it. Post office looks like it's gonna be where it's gonna be for 4 years, and we start to pull back. Does that affect the bond rating or the long-term debt that we have? Perhaps. I'm learning some of this today as well. But those are some of the questions that I've heard as I've talked to people, and I generated some of my own. Thank you for your comments. I'm done.
Duly noted. Yes, sir.
Tim West, 2217 Mill Circle. I just want to say some observations and hearsay that I'm hearing. Am I happy about the raise of taxes 2 years in a row? No. From whence I came, before I moved here full time in 12 years ago, even though I've been coming up for 50 years, my tax rate compared to where I was is a third, which is fine. So don't get any idea.
We will.
Number two, with Dick's comment about taking care of the village and maintaining and the niceties of it. Yes, you need a maintenance building better than this one. Two, even though you're building that, I'm hearing people say, why does the Lagerquist barn not be used in all the stuff around that from the village being stored outside? It looks terrible. Number three, I'm hearing, geez, we want affordable housing, but the conundrum that we're appearing is that you're wanting to build additional construction for affordable housing. But with the taxes going up, and I understand P&I and I understand inflation and whatever else. How is that going to be affordable if the tax rate keeps going up in the future? And what is the price of those homes going to be to the assessment value? So people are talking about this going, our taxes went up twice a year. How is that going to be affordable? Where is affordable housing going to be in Sister Bay in future years? Because that's not going to happen for quite a while. So it's a perception. I don't envy your position where you're at. I mean, I've been on boards and school boards and hospital administration with budgets and stuff, and it's not easy. I appreciate your concern for the constituents because it's real out there. I mean, I hear it. We had owls or wherever else. So I guess the key is that your decision is going to have to be made. Do you really want to lower it? And do you just want to take the heat? Or do you want to push off some projects or reduce the volume of projects? Because it ain't going to get easier.
I
So
select D, all the above.
So I mean, right now, people are not happy. I mean, you know. People were commenting the other day saying, geez, you know, we have 1,200 residents here. About.
Yeah.
And I can't do an RDO or a whatever to raise my income. And I'm not going to sell my house because I can't afford to buy anything else in here when everything else is going crazy. And I talked to Heather Collins a lot. So the question comes up is the affordability of Sister Bay. And do you want the residents, and I have 85-year-olds and 82-year-olds, whatever else, and we're all on fixed income. And if the stock market goes up a lot, I'll take the $200 increase in my property taxes. But we haven't really experienced that for years. And the inflation is killing a lot of people. Because when you go to the pig, they go anywhere else. And then you get your tax increase, people are not happy. So I thank you for what you've done. Spending like drunken sailors, my father-in-law, Ed Bowen, used to sit on the planning committee 50 years ago here. And they heard the same thing. So I would love my taxes to go down. But if it's going to affect the quality of life in Sister Bay or just problem, then I have an issue with that too. There are probably a lot of people who can't afford a $200, $300 increase in taxes. And I'm not gonna say I can. But, you know, it just means I can't buy 2 more bottles of wine or whatever. I'm teasing.
Like, no, you're not.
Yeah, it's Manhattan's. But anyway, so that's all I have to say. It's just more of a perception, and I don't know how you tell the community the predicament you're in, and it doesn't sound like you're in a bad predicament. It sounds like you want to do something to relieve the pressure on this end. But as a board, I think you got a big decision to say, do we relieve the pressure at all?
Thank you, Mr. West.
I'd like to comment, if I could.
Sure.
I think that what we're hearing from you and what we hear from people that attend or Zoom in is pretty consistent, is that communication needs to be better, sorry. Is that communication needs to be clearer and more frequent. And I think that, Tim, I think you're right. And first of all, I really thank all of you, and in particular, Dick and Ken, who are consistent at all the meetings, and not everybody is. That communication after we work through all of this, so how we got where we did, right, in as concise and clear a way as we can, because it's a little bit complicated, but how we got where we are, and so what the current status, getting us to the current status, and what the plan is, because you know, I think we get frustrated because our constituents, and this happens everywhere and is pretty normal, they don't necessarily attend all the time and you know, keep up on meetings and read minutes and so forth. But at the same time, I'm well aware that it's on us to let them know if we, you know, if we have a big concern, we could say, well, come to a meeting. Or we could say, Zoom in. Or we can say, read through the 127-page packet. Or, and so forth. And it's likely they won't, right? And so we could be better about communicating out. And I think in this instance, and we've talked about this at a board, and we talked about it as a board, and talked about it during finance as well. And Denise made a point of discussing it at the last finance meeting. Let's talk about what we're gonna do, like how we got here, what we are going to do, make it very clear through a press release or however we want to communicate this, what we're doing. Are we giving refunds? Are we not giving refunds? And then what the path forward is and why. Period. Because I mean, I think that is important, you know, and so I think that's always important. And as Denise said, there will be some that agree and some that don't. But, you know, at the very least, they're informed. So however they get that, whether it's if it's a snail mail piece in their mailbox or whatever it might be, that's a start, I think. To let them know the why. So I think what was brought up several times with both CLA, with Amber, and also with Beard, was that it's a balance between what we want and what we need. Clearly, over the course of several years, we put off things we needed. And then they all came at once. And, you know, everybody said Sister Bay was stupid and spent too much money and should never have done anything with the beach and didn't do this and didn't do that. Every single municipality in Door County has now done that, including buried power lines. So timing may not have been good, whatever it was, but these are now assets, huge assets for our community. But we are in a spot where, you know, some invisible assets or things that maybe our constituents don't necessarily love as much as a beach, like a parks department or an admin building or some are now have come up. They're on the horizon, they're there, we need to do something, so. But I think informing them rather than going back into history and so forth. You know, to me, that's a lot of, not a lot, it might be sound more like making excuses rather than this is how we got where we were. From now on, you know, how we want to word, taking the TID into consideration, you know, it's a practice we didn't do before, fine. Now we'll do it, now we'll move forward, this is what we're gonna do, and then this is why we're making the decisions we're making. You know, we can't wish everybody comes to a meeting, they won't.
Well, and people that come often say they won't listen anyway because they don't listen to me. Like, that's one opinion is.
Nobody listens to you.
Fact of the matter is, but I couldn't agree with you more that the press release is extremely important here. But I would also say that please make sure that moving forward, that information is as correct as possible. Because what people will remember is what I remember here sitting here last year is that, oh, in 25 and 26, there'll be no tax increase.
Right.
So we know that is, you know, and that stung because, promises made, promises kept, not so much.
Sure.
So take the medicine and pass the medicine. And if it's, you know what, we didn't realize you're gonna have to suck this up and next year maybe this, but you know, you present good reasons why.
You know, when you, communication is important, I agree with you. Why we ripped down Al Johnson's old boutique and the little house that was across the street that some famous guy stayed at. People don't care. They really don't care because that's so far away. You were progressive and you did it. Great. And I would love to say a lot of the residents use the beach. That's a tourist thing, so you gotta, okay, well, you
There's a
have
lot of
kids, you have young
younger
kids.
families use the beach a lot.
Well, whatever, well, my grandkids are.
Same with me, I don't.
But
know,
anyway,
younger families.
I love the dog park, but anyway. Be careful about how much past you go into to justify your future.
I don't disagree, I don't think I think that we're proud of what we did, we should be.
I'm not saying it
I know
isn't,
you are as well, so I'm
but
not
the
suggesting.
big thing is that how much do you delve in past detail versus this is where we were, this is what we did to get where we are, this is where we gotta go.
It's all part of the same story.
Yeah, it is. It depends on how much detail you go into.
Ken?
I throw 2 cents in?
Sure, and then we're gonna move on.
I got one thing to say after Ken.
It's real quick. Ken Church, 2295 Hill Road. I like your idea of being very cautious on what you're doing on CIP stuff. And everything else that has been said, I agree with the majority of it. The only thing that I have to say is I'm not in favor of wasting more money to refund tax money to the taxpayers. I cannot see wasting $30,000-$40,000 to make somebody happy on $300 or whatever their tax bill goes up. That's ridiculous. Just don't increase it as much as you possibly can, whether it affects things one way or the other. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
So, as through all these conversations, what's become apparent to me, I knew this ahead of time, but really when I was talking to Adam and Amber, this is a massive freighter with inertia. It's what government does. Government moves at the speed of government. It gets going in a direction, and you said it, it tries to go in that same direction. I think it's really important. We can't adjust year over year and have an impact 1 year out. That this is a long-term thing. And I think that we thought we were setting a direction last year. We truly believed that, and we were not going in the direction we thought we were going to go. So I think it's important that we have that long-term goal in mind and not trying, we may not be able to correct it for next year. But for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line, I think that it's important to reset that call. So we're not overly reacting, but yeah, I absolutely hear what you've had to say, Ken, and what you've had to say, Dick. And it's something that, what your perspective is something, and your words are something I think about. So I have heard.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are going to move on to 6C, review CIP. So,
Denise, real quick on 6B, then what is the recommendation to the board? Do nothing.
oh, okay, sorry. Didn't mean to skip over that.
I would say do nothing, yeah, I wouldn't give refunds, I think the cost is prohibitive.
I've talked to people, we've heard from people, I've thought about it. I can't, as much as I would like to fix it and make it all better and the boo-boo goes away. I think spending good money on top of this is foolish.
I agree. I think we're looking at somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 to do this, and even at $10,000, that doesn't sound very appealing. That's the kind of number we're looking at. It just doesn't make sense. We just have to make sure we adjust moving forward, and I think that we still should make those cuts we were talking about, but
Right. Right.
not redo the taxes.
Correct.
Okay,
So
so-
general consensus, or would you like a motion?
General consensus is fine, so for the board agenda, I'm not gonna have anything there. They can just read the finance minutes and see what has happened.
Or we can
Are you
give them
okay
an
with that?
update and just say, we had general consensus that for the cost and whatever, we're just
Are we able to discuss it under the
committee reports.
committee reports?
You can talk about what happened, you're not gonna be able to make any decisions, of course, at that time, because you're just giving me an update on what happened at the committee level.
Okay.
But if you want to put it as an agenda item, I can, it's just that sometimes that,
I think it's important we put
Rehash
it as a
this
discussion item.
Well, I think so too,
Yeah.
because that's just a recommendation
Yeah,
from
'cause the board-
finance. That the
board would need
board
to-
could not care about the expense and want to do it anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right, so it has to be. an
so that'll go
agenda
on
item.
Tuesday's agenda, it's okay with that.
Is it next Tuesday or the Tuesday after?
Following Tuesday.
So like Tuesday.
So as I stated, I went through the CIP. And tried to push things out. We may agree, we may disagree, but it was a starting point. Adam put it all into the CIP, but I only had him print out the changes.
Yeah.
So, we could deal with that. If you look,
Seems like we should
in
start
your
with
binder,
the detail.
if you look at page 13,
Okay.
compared to the new 13. About a little over 600,000 was moved out of the CIP for 2026.
Mhm.
So we
And
can,
some was moved from 25,
pardon,
some was moved from 25,
25's already been adopted.
right, but why is this different than that?
Some was moved, like, for example, if you, Louise is right, if you look at streets, this is
4
by
million.
category. I went from 4.5 to 1.
Well, 3.5 million.
So you're looking at the one
I'm looking at page 13.
that's
I'm looking
in
at
the
line
blank.
for streets. And the book I got says 4.5 million, and this says 1 million.
It's Wiltsey that came up for 25. Is it not?
3.5 million, it's probably, yeah,
streets.
we'll see, infrastructure came up.
Well, that's what I said, it was for 25. It said no, 25 was I'm just calling.
Okay, but now I have both of them in front of me, excuse me.
Okay.
So what's the best way to go through this? I mean, just go page by page. You've got it there, but I think we should make sure we also hit the other pages that you.
Absolutely, right. So I think we should start on page 20.
Well, 13 is a summary of 20,
Right.
basically, so we go to 20, right?
Right. Well, actually, we took 21 because that's the individual. We don't need the summary pages. We need to have a conversation on what's
So no changes on 21.
right, because that's done. Broadband is done.
Yeah.
We have administration building. That's in the pipeline. We have. So this is what's budgeted, this 75,000, but when we talked about doing rebates,
We talked about not demoing it,
a net,
right?
right, not demoing it,
This is called storage building, right?
no.
The old fire station.
Oh, the old fire station. I'm so sorry. Okay, I got you.
What page are you guys on?
24 in, no, in the binder.
Okay, so these numbers don't match what's in the binder.
If they don't. Yeah,
Yeah, they do,
They do.
but
they do,
they're
but-
not all printed out, only the ones that had changes on it.
Okay.
I think we don't demo the building. So we know it's gonna go on there, that $75,000 we don't have to spend, is it?
I completely agree, because I don't know who the heck knows what's gonna happen with it.
Right.
Maybe it's worth more with the building, I don't know. Not a great
So
building, but
and I don't know how we maneuver that. It's already in the levy where we are getting the 75,000 from the levy. So what do we earmark it? Is it put in a designated fund that it sits there? How,
Well, okay, so
Adam, how do you think we deal with this? And Julie?
I was gonna say, so we just agreed we're not gonna change anything in the budget.
We're not going
Right.
to amend the budget.
Okay,
Right.
so that means 2025 CIP. You're not gonna change the numbers, but what I think I hear you saying is, however, we still don't wanna spend that. So what happens is, when that project comes up, we don't approve the contract, so we can just make a decision now. Yeah, it's in there, we've levied for it, however, we have just decided we don't want to. Julie, don't even bring that forward to us in 2025, because we're gonna move that in the budget to 26, or the CIP. So I think what I hear is like, Julie, although it's in here, I don't want you to do anything with it, just leave it.
I don't
The
know that we
money's
want to say
levied,
that it
but
goes
it
to
just-
26 though either. I don't know that we want to. What happens if we simply never do it?
can we just leave it there and
We
not do
just-
anything with it? Do we have to?
Yeah, so you'd have a couple of options, I guess. So one would be if you don't spend anything, you have the $75,000 allocated towards the public works building. So what's gonna happen is, the CIP is gonna get transferred money for that 75,000, and that's gonna be now sitting in your CIP fund. If you don't spend that, it essentially is gonna go to fund balance. So you have two options. Either one, you don't designate it for something in the future and it just stays in your ending fund balance. And so then from an auditor standpoint, you could allocate that in the future for a public works building or the demo, or you could put it towards something else. Or you would have, and this would be the question for Amber, is you could have her restrict in the fund balance that 75,000 can only be used towards a public works building demolition in the future. And then they would have a note in the financials that money is there. So that way Vlad knows out of whatever your fund balance is, there's going to be a restricted fund balance. That would be X amount of dollars. And that was either finance approved or eventually village board approved that can only be used in the future to the public works building demo.
We're not taxing them again for it.
Right.
Clearly, because we already have.
Right.
one.
Right.
But we don't have to do anything, I mean, we don't have to do the project this year just because it's in.
Yeah, that we know, yeah.
All right,
So
stays there,
do we
no
want
harm,
it to
no foul.
stay in
Okay.
the ending fund balance? I like restricting it because then it states somewhere that we have this money.
So we aren't spending it someplace else either.
Correct.
Right.
I think we should, let's give ourselves some flexibility on this. I mean, like,
You can always unrestrict it.
it just takes a board motion to unrestrict.
What would that take, Adam or Julie?
I think it's just board resolution, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be, there'd be a motion that you would want probably the village board to make with the direction that that 75,000 would be restricted for the public works building in the future. And then to Nate's point, if you ever needed the flexibility to use that towards something else, then you just need a majority vote of the board that you're basically unrestricting it and it's going towards either the building or something else.
So really, all that does is it makes the board cognizant that that money was allocated for this,
Right.
and now we're gonna, okay.
I'll agree with that. Okay. So we have the IT update. The village server. And then on page 27 is kind of the first major change where, and I push this out to 28 and 29. And I don't know,
If we just keep pushing it out, let's just take it out. Let's just get it out of the CIP because it's something that we've been talking about for over 10 years, and if we're not gonna do it in the last 10 years, and we're probably not gonna do it.
I think at some point we might do it, but honestly, I don't even know if $500,000 would do it.
and
It's
is
really
that ever,
expensive.
is that ever going to be?
Necessary.
In good conscience, spending $500,000 on telling people where to go in our village that's a size of a postage stamp?
Right.
I know that people say they can't find things. Well, open up your eyes, everybody walks around.
Well, there's
With it-
wayfinding. Wayfinding is such a broad, huge, all-encompassing program. There's also a couple signs we could put up. You know, like if we move the post office or if the medical center, that, you know, some people may, but I'm with you. I mean, how many square miles are we?
Right.
Anybody know that? I don't even know, but it's not much.
It's not much. So is there something that we could do where parks would maybe go back and review the study that we have done from the company on the wayfinding signage, look at what they proposed and see if there's something in some places that we need some signage, much smaller budget, and get rid of this
I'm
happening.
looking at the original project, but it's just basically gonna be pretty boilerplate, like, what are people looking for? You know, that it's, whether they don't live here or live here, we have to look at it as a, you know, as a destination area, but also what's critical. You need to know where a hospital is. You need to know maybe where the post office is. You might need to know where a park is that you can't, I mean, like where our sports complex is. I think I know there's a sign on 42 that directing to the sports complex. So that's what it's gonna be, and that's fine, I think. I do.
I don't think it belongs in the CIP. I think it's a small enough budget item that if we need to put it back in there, let's put it back in there, but let's not keep having it come back year after year. There's this big line item, if we want to put it back there, let's have it properly scaled.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
And I think the study's probably almost 10 years old now.
Yeah, at
Probably,
this
but
point
I
it's-
think that we could review it. There might be some design elements, some things that,
Okay, so moving forward in this whole thing is just gonna disappear from the CIP.
yes,
And in the meantime, it's being referred back to Parks to look at the original project.
right.
So 2 changes so far.
Yes.
Okay. Village Hall. I'd like to jump forward a little bit. I think when Julie applied for the grant, there were, to get that grant, there were a lot of additional things you said that we had to put in the building to apply for that grant. So if it was 4 million, you thought easily we could get it down to 3 for renovation. I am very torn with what has the situation that we're in these last couple months and making some really hard decisions and still trying to move the village forward and achieve some of our goals. So I would like to ask the board, first of all, this committee, about having a non-binding referendum on our April election. One of them being, do the people in Sister Bay want us to spend, and don't get caught up in the wording, okay, this is just general, you know, $3 million to renovate the village hall. Something of that, however, and get some true guidance. I know that there's some very devout people who want to see that. I'd like to ask the question. I would also like to ask the question about village spending a couple of $1 million on a post office. And I had mentioned this to Louise on Sunday, and she brought up a point about well, if we build it, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will stay there forever. And I asked Julie, you know, does the post office ever sign a longer term lease, like 10 years? She's checking into that. Again, I think we should ask the question.
As long as they know what they're responding to. My point was, if you ask them, do you want Sister Bay to still have a post office? 100% of the people are gonna say yes. If you ask them, do you want the village to build a $2 million post office? When, I mean, the most they're gonna pay in rent, 1,800, so I mean, not even come close to paying for the bill. Not even close. So, I mean, they just need to know that, you know.
Right, I don't want to get it caught up in the words. We could debate that for a long time. We can talk about that at a later date, plus there's gotta be a legal, I think Randy is the one that has to sign off on any referendum wording.
I don't mind the referendum, I really don't, I just don't want, I want to be really clear with these folks when we're asking this question. I don't want to hear later, well, you didn't tell me it was gonna, that they were only gonna lease it for 1,800 a month. You didn't tell me when that, you know, that's, because that will happen, and that's not fair. That's,
Nobody's saying about doing anything unfair.
I know, I'm not, just, that's what.
You can have unintentional bias. I think that we can avoid intentional bias, but it's important we review that. I also don't, and we're getting down into the words, I acknowledge that, Denise, but just to say it, I don't know that anybody can predict what the post office is gonna be like in 10 years, even the post office.
Absolutely not.
There's just so much uncertainty on that. But I think that we're about to talk about that, and I think that we need to pull that post office from the CIP, and if we put that on there, and if we put it out there for referendum, we gotta put it back on, but I think right now, with what we've heard from the public and what we know through the conversations with the post offices, it should come out now, because I cannot just imagine spending any village money on a post office. So I don't think it's gonna keep the post office here. I don't think we should push them out, and we did actually send them a letter saying we wanted them to find a new place. That's what triggered all, which is what the village board had told, had been our stance for a long time. If we look back to where the post office was when we first talked about this in 2017, it is a vastly different entity than it was back then, and the pressures on it are so much different. I mean, it's Jeff Bezos' post office right now.
Well, and incredibly unprofitable. So it's just a matter of what the, the government wants to do with it, but nonetheless, we asked them to leave. So.
We never asked them to leave.
We did.
That's what triggered it. I mean, like, we had sent them a memo that has said, I mean, that's what,
Oh, before I started, before 2022, you guys asked.
That's what I saw.
yeah, I mean, this has been going on for quite some time.
Well, we said that we didn't want to renew the lease.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that and we want?
I've never heard that. I've never heard that because why have we been,
So the
Post
conversation we had with the
office
post person in Denver said you have to rescind the letter that you sent. That was, he was very clear on that.
I asked him about that today and he was very specific. It's the letter I sent saying, can we have a 1-year lease instead of a 4-year lease? I asked him about that.
Okay, we can have a conversation like that.
All right, so back to this, I'm okay with the
Well,
referendum, but I'm also.
Okay, wait,
fine with
we're
doing
on
this.
page 28.
Okay, now the referendum, so for April, your deadline's in February, which means the board has to approve everything. I'm sorry, the board would have to, the deadline is the day after the board meetings,
Day of the board meeting.
day of the board meeting.
In February or January?
January.
Oh,
You need
okay.
70 days to get a referendum question
Mhm.
on the ballot, 70 days before the election.
We don't have time.
So you need to move the date of the board meeting if that's something that you want to do.
But it's not affecting 2025 anyway, so I mean, you can do it, can they do
You could do it for February of 2026 if you wanted to, have a primary or referendum in spring of 26.
Can they have the referendum?
Not far
They have
away.
a special election,
No
This
special
year,
election.
but it's
no.
huge costs.
It is, no,
Huge
No.
costs.
and we won't have one in the fall.
Correct.
Mhm.
Well, April is our only election this year.
Mhm. Other than the one that we're having on February 18th, because there is a primary.
Which is too late.
Yeah.
Yeah, wait till it for February, guys.
Okay, so that gives us a year to pull together, because I don't want to be rushed. I think,
I think when you're looking at that village hall, okay, so we just approved a contract to have a design, conceptual design. And to have somebody write a CDBG grant application. That's gonna tell us a lot, by the time we look at. By the time we approve this in October, whatever changes we make. We're gonna know. Are those is it gonna move forward or not? Or do you just,
well,
and if
and,
not, then that's a great referendum question.
and we asked the Village Hall Task Force to come up with funding sources. They are not doing that other than the grant, and when we had that meeting about the budget, and it was like, well, how come it's not in here? Why isn't it here? And it was implied that the village should just pay for it when that was not the task that we gave the committee. So,
So right now, we've moved it, I mean, Denise, you're suggesting that,
this is the engineering.
they moved out of 26, am I right? I think that's
Yeah.
what we're looking at to 27, right?
Yeah,
Mhm. And then the renovation was already in 27, and I think you've removed it.
yeah, because we don't know.
Mhm.
If I can just make a suggestion, I think you should wait and see what happens with that CDBG grant before you touch that. Because, hear me out on this. If you do need construction drawings. Let's say you get a CDBG grant and you have to have whatever percent, you have to have $500,000 match. You have to decide, do we move forward with the project or don't we? With your current CIP, you at least have the money sitting there, if you move forward with it. Granted, it's not till 27. But with CDBG, I think you have 2 years or something that you have to expend it.
And that's a matching grant.
They change it all the time, but we're thinking it's gonna
But
be.
it's not a 50-50 grant.
No,
Mhm.
well, they change it, but no, it was not this past year.
Okay, so I'm writing that we will keep this in here until fall.
I think that's something we have to look at and say, what happened with that application? And if it's failed, I'll be honest with you, I'm not aware of anything else out there to save, to fund it. I mean,
So
we
that's
try
staying at
every,
27 until fall, we find out about that grant, correct?
Well, and Julie's saying even in the 2026, the 150 would stay there.
I see, okay.
And once we're making final tweaks to the budget and this or whatever, we'll have that answer.
I guess I could see us keeping the 115 there for 26 and then not doing the 500,000, but we, like Julie says, we don't have to make
What's the
that
point?
decision
We're
right
gonna
now.
get a grant, yeah, right.
I mean, at least if you get a grant, you can show, yes, my community has approved it in their adopted CIP. There, see,
Well, it could be a much more viable asset, let's face it. I mean, right now, it's not very functional. And if we can get some money to make it that way, I think it's a good, I mean, is it at the top of my list? But if somebody else wants to give us $500,000 and we have $500,000, then it's, I mean, that, you don't get better location wise than that. That the village owns, you just don't. You know, and so we may as well.
Okay, so we're talking about the post office, just removing that entirely.
Yes,
From 2026, $1 million.
No, just removing.
just removing it.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
and I have to keep up post office's page 29.
It is, correct.
So we don't have that in here, but.
No,
Because I didn't make any changes to
Okay,
it.
so remove page, post office complete. Page 20. You know, this, the reason I have to take such good notes on is I just sent all this to Bay Lake today on what was in the CIP for. For the inclusion in the parks plan.
So now we have,
no road.
Mill Road,
27.
where the Parks building sits. Pushing it out a year to 27. We just don't know.
So you're saying this is where this is
This is,
23, the Parks building.
yeah. Where we thought the post office might go.
I don't think that we should even include that in there. I think that we need to look and see where we're at fiscally, and it may be in our interest to divest ourselves of some property, and that might be one of them. But I think to have any sort of plan on that property, I think that we should scrap any plans for that property right now.
How about if the parks, before we totally remove it? How about if Parks has a conversation and makes a recommendation?
Okay, as long as that doesn't fall back on, we want to do it because it's in the CIP is.
No,
Okay.
no, not part of the, no.
Yeah.
Because I noticed that you guys, in this one, it says description after demolition of the building, because
Right.
we've already removed demo, right? We removed demo. or
No,
did
we
move it to
restricted
27?
demo.
We restricted it, sorry, okay.
We're not gonna do it this year.
I got you. No, I know, but we restricted it, it's restricted, it can be removed from restriction, but right now restricted to that building, okay, I got you. So this goes to.
With no change, just referring it to park.
And the question of Parks is, what do we want to do with this property?
Yeah.
So we have the Will See property infrastructure.
Is there a grant out there for this?
Well, this is the one that's 500 or 5 million or so that we will.
Right,
wait
we
to
don't,
see.
and we're not sure, when does that come in, if it comes in?
I'm thinking it comes in before inauguration.
It's pretty close.
Well, I think we're gonna, if it's not happening by Jan 20, it's probably not going to. Pretty, as much as we
I mean, I
can,
know it was a long shot, I just couldn't remember the timing.
I don't think it was much of it seems like we made it. You know, past the first round at least, we need to ask for more information.
As for clarification, more information, which was good, but who knows, maybe it's technicality. I think that they're, politically speaking, I would think that politicians are trying to show a win here, that they helped with housing before they leave office, and I think they would make decisions before January. 20th.
Is all of this, is it the 3.5 million all infrastructure or just some of it?
No, it kind of ends up, it's not all
I think it was
infrastructure.
1.5 million or something for infrastructure.
No,
No, way
more
more,
than that.
way more.
No.
Yeah, all right.
The infrastructure is really expensive,
Yeah.
like 4 million.
Oh,
And then we had to show there's some stuff that. There's some stuff that I put in was grant funded because it had specific deadlines, like the road, the sidewalk, etc. I can easily show when that is accomplished and then close out a grant, right? This is more, a lot of this was used more for stormwater ponds, the park, the community garden, extending the sewer lateral to the future community garden. Some of that stuff that wasn't as time sensitive.
so if we don't get the grant, then what do we do? We're gonna know in like 2 weeks.
That's when they're letting us know, yeah.
Oh.
I personally think you need to refer to your housing committee and,
Agree.
you know, I don't, they've done a lot of work.
And
Yeah,
that work will not be in vain, because once there is a plan or a model determined or whatever, none of that will go to waste.
Yeah, I know, I just,
But
I know there's people
how,
excited there's hope for housing. And we delayed it a year, so I think just be mindful on that.
This is also $3.5 million that
Right.
goes up on all of our projections. I think we pull this until we have clarity on what it is, because we also, we're unlikely to just spend that money and not have a plan to recapture some of it. I'm not saying we're gonna make money on this project, but we should try and lose less money, because that land does have some value. We'll get,
I say we keep the page in here with no dollar amounts and no dates.
Next year. Take that out, because I wrote a grant on the understanding this was in the CIP.
She's not coming.
I testified, it's in a CIP, it's in a CIP is what I told them.
Okay, well then we need to push it to 26 and leave it there until we hear from the
I think
grant.
we just leave it alone until we know about this grant and then.
Okay.
Well, you had suggested moving it to 26 anyway.
so.
And right now it's in 25, but
We're going to make these changes, and then we're going to, at the next finance meeting, adopt this. So-
No, there's no adopting. This
can't do
is
that till next year, right?
working.
But I mean, like, when does this become the official CIP? As soon as we're done working here, don't we actually have to adopt it and then?
You already adopted this CIP.
Right.
Yes, so I'm
We
saying,
don't have to adopt this until fall. This is just gonna be a working document.
so we can put that in there as, and that won't impact because it's still officially on the CIP is what I was getting at.
Yes.
So I like what your thought, leaving it blank. on the
No
working-
dollar amount.
No dollar amount.
Or leave as is and discuss again.
But it is, don't put a dollar amount on there,
For 2025.
On the working
or
CIP.
26.
on any year.
Okay.
It's in there, but no year.
No dollar.
No
amount.
dollar amount.
26, but no dollar.
No, there's just.
Then
there's
why
no-
have it in there?
With zero,
We're
with
not putting a year on it. We're not putting a
Because
dollar
we're-
on
That's
it.
why I'm
Because
confused.
the page is just there.
We just want a blank page.
We just want a blank page.
Blank page in the new CIP.
Is this so kind of to remind us?
Yes. So Vlad doesn't have to create another one all over again.
So I have a question. Adam,
Hmm.
in Justin's calculations, his debt calculations, looking long-term, isn't this in there?
No. We'll See's not in there.
Well,
Admin and triangle are in there.
Yeah.
Those are the only two that
That's
he
what he
has in
said in
there?
his note.
Yeah, those are the most up-to-date version we've been looking at, just has those two. I think we'll see, because there's, as you can see, there's some question and consternation, I
Okay.
don't believe we modeled that future. I know it was in one of our projections, but I don't think that's been in the most recent.
I just wanna make sure we're not messing that up.
Okay, if we go to page 35. What I changed here was not the dollar amount for the year. But under the budget impact and other, it said that the village portion of $85,000 for Flint Ridge Road would be covered by a general obligation bond proceed, and I disagree with that. And so this needs to be part of, not bond proceeds, but cash. 100,000, I'm seeing if that's okay with the committee. If we do the village should be able to pay for $100,000 of road
85, you mean.
reconstruction. Well, but after this one, it's 100,000
Okay.
every year.
Oh,
We should be able to pay that cash. Why do we wanna borrow and pay interest on it for 20 years? This should be, we get money for the state for our roads.
mhm.
It should, this should just be part of our regular levy. We shouldn't have to borrow except for anything that's over $1 million for roads, like.
There may be a reason that maybe we were using go bonds? No, you know,
I think it was suggested from Baird,
all right, so add. it
but
to your
I
point of
want
view.
to, I want to change it.
That's one of those that came in very last minute. There wasn't a lot of discussion.
I mean, I understand a lot more about the budget process than I did 2 years ago. I know that I still don't know a lot about it, and I think to Luis's point, there could be a reason why we may want to do that. But is that something we can decide in 2027 or 2026 when we do this? I mean, as I'm looking at this, we need to make all the choices on what we think we should do as a village. And then we need to give that to Baird or whatever financial consultant and say, what's the best way to accomplish this? And let them come up with it. They might say bond for this, they might say don't bond for this.
Adam, can you just give us a 30-second synopsis on why we should or shouldn't pay for $100,000 road every year cash?
Yeah, so I mean, it goes into kind of plan. I mean, one example, because you have the flexibility right now, you can levy for certain things. That is certainly understandable that if you wanted to use that portion of the levy, whatever you decide that to be, that you could do that for streets. Mainly the reason why a lot of municipalities do borrow for streets goes back to what Justin was alluding to, is the useful life of that particular piece of either equipment or roads. Your roads, you're hoping that when you do road improvements, that you're not going to be doing them again for, in a perfect scenario, you're talking 20 to 30 years. So that's where a lot of municipalities will, if it's anything road related, they'll borrow for it because then they put that shelf life over 20 years. But again, you guys are in a bit of a different situation where you do have levy that you can do. So it is completely up to the board. If you want that to be levied, we understand that. If that's something where you want to consider, if there's an item that's $100,000 that you would rather use cash for, as Denise said, and then you want to put this as part of your long-term capital improvement borrowing, those are kind of the levers and the scales that you have an ability to play with.
So what you drive it is really the dollar amount. It's not like it's the 2 million from Mill Road or something.
Right.
I see.
Right.
It's a
I mean,
lot.
yeah, if it's definitely $1 million plus, we're going to tell you the best option would always be to do a debt issue because again, you can put that over 20 years. That's not just asking your taxpayers next year to cover that. It's spreading that out. When it's these smaller ones, again, if it's roads, municipalities do it multiple ways. Some of them, no matter what the dollar amount is, they will put that as a GO, a borrowing. And then there's others where, again, if they have the flexibility to levy for it, that comes down to kind of the project list. And when you guys are going through what you're doing right now, it's if there's something else that's $100,000 that you feel is at a higher level of need, then that becomes levied and this gets pushed either to borrowing or into future years.
Well, the other thing though too is sometimes we might not be borrowing any money every single year or every other year or whatever. So that's why I think it's easier also just to have it cash. I mean, yeah, we could go over to Nicolay and say, you know,
Right.
give us $100,000 loan, but I mean, we're not going for borrowing millions of dollars every year that we could just
Right.
tack this onto. So best practice, I believe, is cash.
In this case, I would agree, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where we would look at in the future with your CIP is, does it, you know, if there are things that either are potential bond proceeds that aren't high dollar, does it make sense to do? We do this with a lot of municipalities where we'll borrow for 2 years worth of capital improvement projects. And that would include that. So instead of like these where it's 100,000, it'd be $200,000 would be tacked onto a borrowing for other items. You know, and those borrowings are generally lesser dollar value. They're 1.5 million or $2 million that you'll do over 2 years. So just something to consider.
And so then when we get to the next page, which is what was added, yearly street improvements, 100,000 every year, again, change to cash. I mean,
When
when,
you cut the dollars, in the same year.
yeah,
Okay.
all same years,
Mhm.
just not borrowing for it. Waterfront playground equipment.
But it, yeah, I have no argument there.
Now,
So what I would say about the playground equipment is this is something that we should look at as a matching fund situation. Where the village should contribute, try and have some entity get matching funds for it. Playgrounds are relatively straightforward to raise funds for,
Yeah,
and we can maximize our dollar value.
yeah. I also think it's worth it in that process. You guys to take a look at a sort of a holistic look at that area. You know what I mean? Because some of, and really talk to, I'm happy to go talk to the folks at Bailey's in terms of what they put in, and because that area we could maybe change it a little, do you know what I mean? And I'm not suggesting rip everything out and start over, but in terms of play and how kids play and what might, do you know what I mean? We might want to take when I say holistic, maybe we probably could extend it a little bit, maybe.
well, we have talked about that on parks in the past.
Okay,
that
so
we
sorry,
would-
all right.
That we would reconfigure the space. It
So-
would grow larger.
Mhm. And then certainly, you know, more open to everyone. So that it's, so a play for everyone and it's, for all abilities. And as I said, Ellie was on that committee. I can ask her and give her opinions on things like that. And we may be able to do, you know, get some funding.
Well, I would think that that's a good grant application. So, but, so I'm thinking, you know, this is probably, the calendar doesn't go out far enough. I'm thinking by the time we end up doing this, this is well over $500,000.
It is.
So it's a slow 5+ year, sticking the money away. Hopefully, we don't have to steal it for something else, but that's why we have a CIP, right?
Yeah,
So
can we
what-
put something in there to us about matching funds? Just to mention, so we have
Grants,
that in the
matching
description.
Waterfront playground equipment is zero cost, but there'll be a note saying this will proceed if they're matching funds,
Matching fund grants.
but we don't know if they're matching fund grants.
Yeah, we need to do some research.
I guess I'd kind of like to see it stay with what we've got here, $100,000 for those years, so
Yeah.
we've got some concept of
If
it.
it's matching, well, that's true.
And then we're just saying,
Because I also think too, that,
I don't know about 25 though, you guys. It's 25 right now. I don't know if we can put.
it's already,
anything
yeah,
for
it's
25.
already in there.
Oh, that's true. We can't change it.
Can't change it.
Okay, yeah,
So that just gets banked.
yeah, okay.
So no change to the waterfront playground equipment, but a note not to proceed. Staff don't proceed in 2025. Because we want it banked.
Mhm.
to change but do nothing.
And if there are matching funds or grants or something, I remember somebody saying that the best place for an inclusive playground was out at the sports complex. Well, I disagree, because the waterfront is where the bulk of the people are.
We get more people there, yeah.
But I also think that depending upon how we move forward, how long this takes, if
Right.
there's grants, matching funds.
Yeah.
That we need to expand what's at the sports complex also, and can have a smaller version of
Uh-huh.
inclusive out there
Yeah.
also.
We've got plenty of space.
So it could encompass.
Yeah.
Two places.
I guess the only thing I want to reiterate is that we should just make sure that we're maximizing our dollar there by getting something matching it.
Okay, so the other, so on that page then, on page 38. Waterfront playground, really no change, but just do nothing. The other thing that's on here is the woodland trail was completely cut out.
So we're coming to that on 41.
Right.
Well, she's on 38, it's the recap of everything,
Yeah.
but that's on 41 here.
So what I would counter with on 41 is let's not put anything in this for 25, let's not call it the Woodland Trail, but let's have a trail budget. Put $100,000 there for 26, 27, 28, 29. So we're not allocating to a specific thing, we're allocating that much money for a road. Let's long-term, set that long-term goal of having better trails and allocating some resources towards it.
Interesting.
I would like to just share a little frustration and put this on this. So we had a trails group said, we're gonna have a trail there. We spent a year with consultants and working out our rec plan where our trails are. We do smart growth where our trails are. We need to make some,
We have the trail to Ephraim coming up, and we have the 57
yeah,
trail.
I'm not saying that
This
either
is
way,
not,
I'm just saying.
they're also, none of those people sit at this table or on this
I
village
know.
board.
I just know I'm trying to wrap up a comprehensive plan and an outdoor rec plan and I can't. Because it just keeps changing all the time. So do I tell her to just take Woodland Trail completely out?
I would.
No, that's still our goal.
So keep Woodland Trail in, keep it on our plans.
I thought you have 0 in there. Am I not?
No, it's
You're okay.
60,000.
Not some water?
I have water.
Okay, so leave the trail in all the planning documents, right?
I mean, if you wanna. Do we have to keep it as Woodland Trail in here for your purposes?
No, I'm just saying if we want it in our planning documents, because we're looking 3 years out in the rec plan and 20 out in the comp plan.
It should be in those
Just leave it in there.
plans.
Okay,
Yes.
so we don't have to worry about changing
No.
those stuff. Okay, that's
No.
good, because that's all new maps and more
No.
money on the consultants
no, no.
and stuff like
No.
that, so. Okay,
So, do we agree that we should just have a trail budget?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
And then I think we have to leave, I mean, like, we can't change over 25, so just 26 moving forward.
and change it to a trail budget in 60,000 a year?
That's a lot of money, Dave. It's a
It is.
lot of money for trails.
It is, it's also the fastest growing form of transportation out there. I mean, it's.
Wait, is this walking or biking?
Yes,
Could be equestrian, could be horse, it just says trail.
Woodland Trail to me is like maybe walking. I thought it was walking. No, I don't care.
No, it was Woodland Trail was specific
That's the one
to a
on
person.
Woodcrest. I gotcha. So now
right.
we're back to a trail budget.
Right.
I understand the value of both, biking and 100%.
what happened with the existing trail we have? Is it a biking trail or is it a walking trail? It's, oh,
Probably,
Oh, wait, we need to back up.
but a bike trail is gonna be more expensive than.
We need to restrict that $55,000
For the Woodland Trail.
for the
Through the trail
engineering,
budget.
just like we did with the demo.
About for the trail budget now, right? There you are.
Oh, okay, because it's already there. is what you're
Because
saying.
it's already there, we
Yeah.
need to restrict that. And then Nate's proposing 26.
26, 27, yeah, so I'm taking it from here, where it's 855 on here, reducing it roughly in half to 400.
55 restricted, and then what happens then moving forward?
100,000.
Or 26, 27, 28, is that the deal, or?
29.
That's what I'm proposing.
I'll pick apart of that later.
Joking.
Bye, Kurt.
Thank you for keeping that, appreciate it.
For keeping that.
The dog permit.
That's all donation.
Yeah, it's all donation. But I did write in here that we could use some of that money once we know. Once we zero in from our parks meeting.
Yep.
Community garden, whatever,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
tree planting.
For audit, blog request, oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I
I'm
mean,
thinking the original dog park, but okay. Got it.
okay, so we have the trail to Ephraim, which is nothing
Granted,
changes.
right?
Well, we have a cap in 2026, there's 300,000 that we do have to levy for. Because the grant was only 900.
Okay, so dog park renovation stays the same, Highway 40 trail to Ephraim.
Stays the same.
And with Able Hope. Park. Days.
I don't know the. Yeah, it stays.
Can be small.
It's small
but
amount of
there.
money.
Yeah.
It's donation. So, but then we go to Pebble Beach, which is page 45. That's really
So-
the only other one you're changing.
Here. So there's a couple of, I thought of this after. So in 2026, we have 30,000
For engineering.
for engineering. But then really not doing anything until 2028. So either the engineering needs to be pushed to 2027, you have the engineering the next year, you do the project, or you do the project, you move it back into 2027. I just, it has been this way for a long time. People love it. I don't see it as a priority. So I'm thinking the engineering, we could push out to 27.
Is engineering just getting an engineering plan? We're not doing any work, right? Okay.
The only thing is, keep in mind, and you know the history of this, I don't. That somebody donated money supposedly on the condition we would do an ADA accessible overlook out there, and we've done nothing. So we do have to be mindful of that, or we're not gonna get donations out there. So that is, I think, why this keeps coming up, is like, hey, wait a minute, we told somebody we we're gonna do something out here. I don't know the history on
Is
that.
that part of the
I mean,
engineering that we would do?
Yeah, that has to be engineered. You have to have the ramp engineered. So the engineering is, depending how far you go, but it's the walkway to the beach, because that has to
Yeah.
be an elevated walkway, engineered, slope, etc.
Yeah.
That parking lot should be engineered because there's a lot of runoff, and right now it just
Yeah, the parking lot.
is gonna wash
the
right
parking
into
lot.
the bay. So you have to engineer like a bioswale to catch and divert the water. So you don't end up with bigger gullies in that parking lot. It's kind of like a preventative thing. That is gonna take a while. I'll be honest with you, Denise, I've been seeing some of these projects, you know, like the Highway 57 trail, that design started in 23, and we just got it done. The company that's working on, so some of them do take over a year to engineer.
Can we get some hard information on this? What this obligation is we have for the accessible overlook? I'd like to know if it's, what did we tell?
How much money is it?
He gave
Where is it
us-
sitting in an account?
We spend it.
No, where is it right now?
My understanding was, and Heidi, you may know more about, you know more about this, but this man said, I will give you, what was it, $500,000 towards the purchase of Pebble Beach. And in exchange, I want you to agree that you're gonna build a handicap outlook out there someday.
But he gave the money to the land trust.
He gave the money to the village, didn't he?
I don't know, Bo was very secretive about the whole thing. I didn't know what was going on with that.
Wouldn't we show a deposit if you gave it to the village?
I would have to go, I just know
Right.
in talking to
Right,
Tasha.
but the land trust is, so we need to clarify whether he gave, not saying that we still can't do an overlook, but
Yeah.
I don't know that the village got a $500,000 check because the land trust was raising the money.
My understanding is we got the check to pay for our portion of it. Because land trust paid part, we paid part, right?
Research.
Vlad, can you check and see if you can track down where that donation or how that worked? I saw it one time. It's just one of those things where I'm like, no, we've got honored this. This man gave us $500,000. Now, we
Like
did have bits.
2017 or 18, right?
Well, we need to know what it is we're supposed to honor. It's kind of free floating out there, and I understand how this is, but let's nail down what our obligation, what we
Yeah,
said we did.
we have it in writing. I guess I assumed the board remembered or knew, but
I
Because
No, I had not heard
anything
that.
in writing.
Yeah,
well, okay. And then we have had actual bids to do work out there. So we do know that. So that's what was reflected in the original CIP that we adopted.
To do the overlook, we got bids for that.
Yeah, that was, we actually had an engineer look at that, because remember, last spring, we were gonna proceed with a grant on this. And then I know, Louise, I think it is, you, when you came on the Parks Committee, I think you had said it's not that bad, let's not do anything, so we stopped the grant application, because it was, Knowles Nelson was the one that would help fund that entire park renovation. And then the fund for Lake Michigan would fund the bioswale.
there's a big part of me that says it's fine how it is, but if we have enough, we told somebody we're gonna do it, we need to know what we told them.
Yeah, I
We should
would.
look at that.
I agree.
I would be more inclined just to let it be what it is. Not everything has to be,
Well, right, and that's what a lot of us local old
Yeah.
timers,
Yeah.
how we
I
feel
mean, the
about
parking
it.
areas are really nice compared to what they used to be in that, and the path of the park's cleared is beautiful. The path from, over to where,
On the ridge or what path?
no, it's a wide path that goes, towards where, Fred Park used to be,
What, from the road to the water?
from the parking lot
Okay.
over there
Parking
to
lot.
the other one, yeah. To the
It's
other
on the
parking area.
ridge. You're
It is
talking
on the
that one.
ridge. Oh.
It's on, yeah.
You
It's
just said
on the
no.
ridge. No, yes, I didn't know it was called the ridge, but yeah, the ridge. But it's beautiful. It's well made, I mean, very clear, well made, always clear and well maintained.
I think we should leave it as is right now and get more information before we make any changes to it,
Okay.
because like Julie said, it could take that long to ever go through the process of engineering. But I think we should revisit it once we have more information.
So leave as is, as adopted, Nate, or as written in here?
As,
Well, the engineering was still in 2026.
yeah, so I'm gonna say engineering in 26, construction in 28,
So as written,
As
as
proposed.
proposed, yes.
as proposed.
Do. I moved up. First of all, there was not $75,000 in the ice rink reserves. That we would only have to levy for 15,000. Ice rink fund, so the budget impact is incorrect.
Say that one more time, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Under the budget impact.
Yep.
Page 49,
Yep. Sorry. Gotcha.
it's it's incorrect. We don't have $75,000 in reserves.
Oh.
So it is the whole $90,000. So I moved it up because 27 was getting a little too heavy in my calculations. But, I don't, isn't this something that the friends
They
or
could
the
probably-
group all fundraise for?
Yeah, they could probably do it. I don't know if 90,000 is even the right number, but probably, yeah.
That seems kind of high for all those boards,
I don't
and
know.
especially when there's
Maybe I'm not.
sponsors that are.
And
Yeah.
the concrete coils and the refrigeration system, that's probably about right, but that could change, but yeah, I think that we could ask them to.
So would we want to do a match? Do we want to pay anything? Do we want them to pay for it all? Do we pull it from the CIP?
I think we pull from the CIP, and if they want to ask for something, they can,
I mean, they have asked in the past. That's why I think Miles has said, we don't need them this year. We don't need them this year. And it kept,
Well, you're not gonna get new boards, I mean, why get, I mean, to me, I think you want
new
at
boards
least
when you have
coils, yeah, when you've got.
the new ring.
Right,
So,
so you pull it,
all right, so we're removing it and somebody needs to tell them.
I'll tell Ross tomorrow.
I would, right. I think this is gonna take a while.
Yes.
I'm still very supportive of the project. I also, I would like to believe that if the Friends of the Ice Rink raises money for the coils and everything and gets this built,
That warming house won't be sufficient.
that,
Right.
right, and that maybe they would pitch the community foundation on doing some matching funds, public-private with the village, where we would not have to foot the whole bill.
Yeah,
I think 50 and 51 come out, we're gonna give them a $500,000 this year. If we need to do something else moving forward and we want to do matching or something along those lines, fine, but I don't think that we should be. Definitely not 51. And I'm not saying we wouldn't want to, the logic for the warming house, why I think we still would make sense to contribute to that is because it's not just gonna be a warming.
yeah, it's.
Right, it's a
community center.
community. center.
Yeah, the coils, that's,
Yeah, but the coils, we pay nothing. There's no levy, Nate.
what am I guess I'm not seeing the,
If you go to page 51, Nate, under the notes, it says Friends Group seeking donations for concrete work and coil.
okay, well, when I'm looking there, it doesn't say, just has the whole punch through, that's all.
Yes, so
Okay,
yeah,
that's,
so
so it just says source, so,
right,
okay,
other source,
okay.
other
That
source.
changed, that
On
was it.
52, it's the same thing for the refrigeration
Okay.
system.
Um,
Nothing on the levy, just in here.
Mhm.
So again, back to page 50 with the community center, it was how the numbers were shaking out that I put the 200,000 in for 26 and 100,000 after that. Trying to
It needs to stay here, but yeah. I agree.
level out 26, 27, 28, 29.
Should this say that it is building a fund towards the warming house? The reason why I ask that is boards change, staff change, you look at it, we got $200,000 to do something in 2026.
No, it should be
It's a fund you're
It's
building.
correct.
For not, here's $200,000 to spend in 26, here's 200,
Yeah.
because that's the way it works. And so this is all for a fund to renovate the center
No, this is brand
We're
new
building a new one.
structure. And I think it should be community
I
center
agree. Not warming house.
slash
Yeah.
warming house.
Yeah,
It should be
it's community
reversed.
center first, I agree.
You're gonna build something for $500,000.
No.
We aren't,
No,
but they're gonna,
it's,
It's a fund to build a community center warming house.
Can we throw matching funds in there? You know, that we have an expectation that somebody else is gonna contribute towards this project.
Fund for villages share of, that way.
Okay.
um. Yes, because then I think we went into fire and there was nothing, I didn't touch fire and I didn't touch the library or anything to do with utilities. So yes, that's it.
yeah, I have
Or the
a
marina.
question. As long as
For the
we're-
marina.
I don't, you know, and forgive me, because I don't remember if this is in the SIP for utilities, but, Dave Elliott mentioned to me that that Bailey's has an interest in talking with us and maybe some other communities about, a sledge dryer and building one together.
Megan
So
talked
that,
about that at the board meeting.
Yeah, and I talked, they hired a
but I
consultant.
thought, I meant, did she say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but did she say partnering with other
Communities.
communities to do it? Okay, then I
Maybe.
completely.
Well, no, it was, okay, so let me back up. The plan has been, we would build it and it would be a source of revenue to offset our expenses. So we charge them because
I remember that, yeah.
So it's a,
with sludge, it becomes much easier if you're in control of it and somebody's just paying for it versus we ran into some issues, let's be honest, with partnerships out there in the past and
Oh,
had a lawsuit on how things were handled out there.
gotcha.
there's two different lessons to learn from that. The one, you need to be more ironclad with your partnerships and you start them, or you shouldn't do partnerships. Now, what, those are both legitimate takeaways from there, but
Yeah, and then they had, so Bailey's Harbor hired a consultant to look into what they're gonna do. You know, what are we gonna do? Our expenses are so high, and I said, well, just so you know, this is what we're doing, and we have talked about if we're successful, that we'd be able to take their slot and save them those expenses, because it's much cheaper, of course, for Bailey's Harbor to drive to Sister Bay than to Green Bay. Sister Bay opened up for a little while, but it's gonna close down. So.
But I also thought Gibraltar was interested, no?
They
thought Dave
all,
said-
I think they all will need to, you mean to build their own sludge?
No, what I thought Dave was inferring was to build one in northern Door County that we all use and we all combine, combine forces and build it together. I realize we maybe haven't had the greatest history with our, that's, I mean, so, because this thing was gonna be what, $8 million?
We
Oh,
have
way
asked,
more than that.
Okay, whatever.
we have asked one community, yeah, I mean, we could
I'm just
certainly,
throwing it out there,
yeah,
because he mentioned
we
it.
could certainly revisit that. We haven't, when we looked at it a year ago, we had, I know one that I'm thinking right now was like, oh, we don't have an interest in partnering. So, and we could revisit it. They'd all have to,
I think Bailey's would be interested because I also talked to, Paul Cord. And he was on, I think they have a utilities committee, he's on it anyway.
I'll talk to Dave.
and you're looking at it'd be an interesting project because you're looking at a lot of utility districts all working towards one and so that'd be a nightmare.
It's big.
But
It's
it's
a
it'd
nightmare,
be a
it's
big
an
project.
opportunity. I mean, like,
Maybe we
if
could
it
build
was
it in
easy,
Liberty
somebody
Grove.
would have done it, but it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, it could be,
But it's also
be on
very
a shy
important
way, anything that's
that
hard.
we learn from our past mistakes, because there were clearly some mistakes made with the best of intentions.
Well, I definitely think that's something referred to the utility committee. to do.
That's why I'm bringing it up here, because I didn't know if it was any, honestly, I'm zero familiarity with utilities. So that's why I just wanted to let you know that you had mentioned it and there was an interest.
Well, Megan just texted me, sent me an email. I okayed the agenda
We'll just do it at another meeting.
It doesn't have to be immediate, but, and then I saw Paul Corden, he said the same thing. He was gonna go talk to one of his guys, I forget who it is that runs utilities for them, you would know them, yeah, Don Hurst. Anyway,
I would, I'd like to ask you to do something else, Vlad.
Sure.
I would like the way the tabs are and the way that this is put together.
in the same order?
No, differently. I would like it to start with general government. And then I would like it to go to streets or parks. Well, I guess I can talk to you about that later, because we don't do much
With everything at the end?
with, well, and then the library's thrown in the middle of it and fire, and it's just not, and something,
big stuff
marine is
first.
in between
Yeah,
that we
marine's in
have
the middle,
nothing to do
yeah.
with.
True.
So I just, when we get this, we get to a certain point and we know we're pretty much not dealing with the rest of the CIP, because it's not really,
It's easier to work with.
it
I
is.
agree.
Can we
And
also,
then the tabs can also line up.
Uh-huh.
just ask Vlad to also talk to Adam too, because he may have, Adam has dealt with many other municipalities, he might have some input on streamlining the CIP layout.
So, and this is the template you guys came up with, correct?
Yeah, so this is one that we use, and again, we can customize it however you want. Generally, what we try to do is in the summary tab, the reason why it's structured the way it is because of when you combine the 5-year total costs, it goes from highest and then goes to lowest. So that's why it's structured the way it currently is right now general government's at 13 million, streets is 6, parks is 2 over the 5 years. But again, it's your CIP and template. So to Denise's point, if there's certain things that you really don't have that much control over and don't, want to have more focus, we can move it, amend it however you want.
Yeah, that's why, marine and fire in the middle, okay.
Right. Because over the 5 years, they have, when you add up the total amount of costs over the 5 years, that's just the way that it's typically structured. But again, you can structure a CIP however you want.
Okay, and the tabs that are on here, that's it, that's all we have. Okay. All right, I'll give that to you before we leave, Vlad. Okay, oh, what's,
You had sent over a review SIP, this was just for streets, so we don't need to go through that, right?
That was everything we did. and
No, all the
then-
pictures and stuff, we just
Yeah.
need that for reference, okay.
Well, we did say, when we did the CIP, that we would revisit that and prioritize those streets. So,
we don't have to prioritize them,
yeah, I know, I don't know.
because Fieldcrest is in here, and plus we're putting 100,000 in after we do, not Fieldcrest. Flint Ridge.
No, Denise, what I meant was at parks. Remember, that was presented in like July or something.
We did talk about priority.
And then we, got closer to the actual budget time. And we said,
There's no money.
there's no money, but, and we said, let's attach the list, so it's in there, and we'll prioritize it later.
Pictures, yeah.
So then now that we're talking CIP, I put that in there, like, hey, don't forget, we need to prioritize these roles, which ones are gonna be in 26, which ones are in 27.
Park should
That's
be
the parks.
prioritizing.
I agree, park should be doing.
Okay, 6D, financial policies and procedures.
So, we've talked about amending financial policies and procedures. I know it's been on the whiteboard since I started from day one. Tasha's been trying to get these. I gave you what we have, which really is nothing, not much. We have talked a lot about policies and procedures as part of this tit in, tit out process. And I think that if we're not happy with the way things are done, we need to adopt a policy on that, such as when the tit in numbers are known, it goes back to finance committee or something, or to the board. That's one policy you could have. We've also talked about, you know, we've talked about, having a cap on how much do you have in reserves, or how much debt do you have, what do you carry? So do we want to have policies on that? You saw Adam and Justin recommend a policy.
I didn't like it.
We don't have to like it, we just need
It
something.
was just a sample of one.
No,
I know.
my
we
point
just
is,
need
I
one.
think the only thing that we need to change in our budget policies, and there's a lot in there, there's pages and pages,
And if we're fine
is-
with that, fine, but
is how, when we have the TIF numbers, is, as soon as that we need to utilize at least the previous year's TID numbers in our calculations before we have the new numbers.
Yeah, and we could bake in an increase just to be on the safe side.
Absolutely.
Because I think if I heard them right, I think that there's preliminary numbers that come out in like August, or I don't know.
No.
Okay.
Mm.
I'm
Yeah.
wrong.
Numbers go to, the assessor has to give the numbers to
To the
the
state.
DOR in June,
Mhm.
or the
I
end
know.
of June.
Yep,
DOR comes out with something
preliminary numbers.
middle of August.
They come out at the beginning of August, then we have
Oh,
10
the
days
2
to
week, the
challenge.
10
Yeah,
days.
but is there any reason we couldn't use that? Preliminary number? No?
no, that's just showing you our value. We don't know the impact. We don't know what the other taxing jurisdictions.
We
don't
need the
care.
TID. I
We
need
don't
the
care.
TID.
So we can use that.
We don't care what anybody else taxes.
Okay, well, just so you know, that number is in your budget when you're looking, when you're setting your operating mill rate.
We'll have it that early, our
You-
TID.
You do, and it's in your operating budget. That number that you're talking
The
about.
preliminary
August,
TID
that
number in August, yes. I
Because
know
you're,
exactly what
that's
you're
just
talking about.
value. You're
I
just
got you.
talking value.
Mhm.
That's in your budget. So you're not changing it. That's already in your process. That's there.
You're saying the total value, not just the TID value.
What I'm saying is that value that's known in August, that's in that operating budget that you adopt.
What is that value? The total value?
I'd have to go back and look at the budget on it, but those numbers, what we know is what goes in there.
Okay.
The
So we
issue
need the
with that-
TID in, TID out worksheet.
Yeah, the what,
Okay,
again, what you had the issue or the concern with is am I backwards, what, the TID out number? No, the TID in number.
TID in number.
It's the TID in number.
So the issue is the workbook, as it has been done in the past, it has information about your TIDs, but it is not calculating that tax impact in the rate that they're approved, that you've been approving.
Got it.
So that's where, when we talked about for the last 7 years, when the board has set the rate, they've been setting the operational rate and not it. The workbooks currently do not account for the added taxes for the TID, which then creates the TID in number that Vlad puts and sends to the county. So that's the additional step that would be recommended, is in the workbooks, you want to account for that. So that way, again, we'll have an estimate and it should be pretty close, but you want to get that information so the board can see what that impact is going to be and then make decisions accordingly based on that.
The policy, simplify it, correct me, Adam. Your policy is, once those TID in numbers are known from the worksheet, it goes back to the board so they can see their final mill rate to see if they need to make any changes.
Any adjustments.
okay.
Correct.
But we will have a placeholder in there.
And the worksheet.
Yes, there's added formulas that I'm gonna have to work with Vlad on to get in there that will account for that. And that way then we'll have an estimate that we can give you, and then it'll come back once the numbers have been finalized and you'll see whether or not it's the same or if it has increased, decreased, etc.
So I will write that up as a policy and that will go to the board for adoption.
I also think that anywhere we refer to an operational mill rate, it needs to be labeled operational mill rate. Because we've got a number of places where we had that, it just said mill rate, hey, and that is,
Mhm.
that is caused a lot of confusion.
Want to do anything with the policies recommended by Amber or Justin? Not seeing that template one that they sent, but if you remember, Amber told us a while ago. Do you want to have a policy on how much you keep in reserves, how much you spend?
We have that.
Well, she recommended the up one.
I recall that we passed one, but Amber has said a couple times that we don't have it, but I remember
I
us,
know that we have passed it.
Well, she's not
what did
aware
we
of it.
pass though, I guess.
Yeah.
somebody-
Yeah, the auditor's not aware of it because this is from the audit we got in July, June. We'll go back and look for that. See if maybe there is something.
We have both, I think we have both. Okay, I'm just asking.
And there was, maybe we didn't pass this as a policy though, it's possible we passed it as something else, or maybe we think.
I don't- This fall, we talked about it, said, hey, we need to make that a policy and, because Denise, I remember you even saying, you said 25% or something.
No, that was the minimum,
25
25 to 40.
Yeah,
That, I know that
Not
we
over
discussed that with
40.
Tasha.
And right, because we questioned the 40%, which
Mhm.
we thought was a little bit high. And then she said, but that 40% gets us through that of paying our bills before the second round of tax. We get reconciled from the county or something like that. That's why it,
but we never did anything with that. We talk about it, but we've never made it an actual policy. A financial policy that we can hand an auditor or somebody and say, here are our financial policies. So do we want to do something on that?
that's fine, 25 to 40. That's what that
it
was
at-
our goal anyway.
I think that should be our goal.
Well,
Something
we
that,
do have something to that effect in,
It's in the audit, yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
listed in the audit that they do. So I remember when we were in Hobart, what would happen is once the audit was finalized, is there was a agenda item that essentially was brought to either the finance committee or the board, and you would review specifically that and say, you know, there's a general policy that you are, as a village, we want to be between 25 and 40%. And if you're in that window, you wouldn't do anything. If you were over that window, then the finance committee could have a conversation of recommendations of, okay, you know, we're actually at 50%. Do you want to stay at 50% or do you want to move that 10% that you're over to capital improvement or to offset the general fund, you know, something like that. So that's something you guys can, you know, chew on and think about.
and then the third one was from Justin saying, I recommend you implement a debt management policy that restricts the village from exceeding 75% or 85% of your available borrowing capacity. Don't do anything?
That's just my opinion.
I think that we should.
I don't think it hurts.
We can always undo it if we have to, but it's on there, it's a break, it's a check for us. To say, oh my gosh, we're going over 75%, now we've got to undo something that we didn't pass.
This is my opinion. You have a debt schedule where it's pretty, I don't have it in front of me, but you're getting pretty close to that, so.
No, we're not. We're nowhere near close to
Isn't one of them-
75%. Nowhere
We're
near
not-
that.
Maybe 51, I think is peak, right?
No, I'm trying to think that it's, what is that 75% in that schedule? You have it, Denise?
I don't know if it was in this packet.
I think it was 26 or 27.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the
Oh,
debt
no,
that's
it's in
at-
here.
It's not the debt that's at.
It's in the ring binder. No, it's not.
Yeah, 'cause I'm talking about that big forecast thing, so my point was gonna be. I think it's a good goal. But. But there's some years where that's pretty high yet, I forget.
There is that.
Not 75%, it's not at 75%, he has a number there where I think that's. You
Yeah,
got it,
that's-
Glad, thank you.
That is it. Thank you.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah,
It was
the
50.
one that,
When I get a future projection, it was.
the estimated remaining debt
Should be in that folder
capacity,
that I wrote. Yeah.
percent of cash, it's percent of capacity remaining is what Justin called it.
So he's not saying 75% that we should have that much capacity.
No, he's saying you have that much left.
So we shouldn't exceed 25%.
25%.
Left, we should have at least 25% of our debt capacity remaining.
Which
It also means.
we have
should-
since 2017.
Yeah.
Doing very good with that. Does that even need to be in a policy?
That's what I'm
I
saying.
think it does. I still think it's one more time where some other board in the future
Can
hits
change it.
that. They can change it, but they have to change it then. One more thing that they have to do to undo what we've done. Luis, what do you think?
I think it's fine.
To have it about
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm not gonna argue about it.
I mean, the finance committee, of course, can always change what,
Well, yeah, we can, but again, it's something that. One more.
So here's a tangent on financial policies and procedures. Sorry, go ahead. Would you like to be in your? Had to look at something. I don't understand how the village pays its trustees. I brought this up to Heidi a while ago and she said she never even thought about this. But we fill out a quarterly sheet. I believe Heidi compares them to the meetings that we have had, makes corrections if need be. And we get the lamest check stub that says,
Board meeting.
board meetings,
Plan meeting.
committee meetings or whatever,
Yeah.
with no, I have no way other than just counting to make sure that it's correct. And then when an adjustment is made, something is added or subtracted, although you did do that, thank you, Heidi. I don't know what's been changed. What did I miss? What did I not go to? What was canceled? I mean, we just have no idea. When somebody works a 40-hour week, it says how many hours they worked. There was any overtime, any sick pay, blah, blah, blah. How many parks meetings am I getting paid for?
you're looking for
How
a
many
printed
plan
copy
commissions?
of. Just
No,
copy
I'm
what you
looking at-
submitted.
She wants the
Put
detail.
changes on it.
You want the
And
detail.
is that not doable on our system to say what we're getting paid for?
You can get a copy of our payroll register, but it's not just you, it's a combined register of every employee. So if you want your individual payroll register, that's just an extra step that we will print out and give to you then.
But it can't be on the
It's not on
paycheck
the paycheck
stuff.
stuff, no.
Why can't we just take what you give us, red pen it, make a copy, and that goes in your check?
Because the check is automatically
Oh,
deposited. I mean,
Well,
you
but-
sent
but-
me the
but-
receipt.
Still get a hard copy.
So you just print out, you make a modification if it's not, was submitted, that seems pretty simple, just. Heidi, if you correct it. there's
Yeah,
something that
usually
doesn't
we
match
try
it,
to email you and tell you. I mean, I can't verify all meetings because I don't get minutes for all meetings, but I just have to do the best I can.
We have to
Okay,
give
and so
minutes.
that's why we have to do the sheet, because there's not always minutes to verify.
Right, like I don't get minutes from the Historical Society or Tourism Zone Commission or SBAA. Or they don't say who was at the meeting, so,
Okay,
yeah, I can't verify those.
so you take our word for it then on some meetings.
I have to. Fire
Okay.
Commission, I don't get those minutes until months later. Because they don't meet often enough.
Oh,
Well, DCTZ does have minutes, but it comes much later and they don't meet that often, it's not,
Same case, yeah.
it's quarterly.
Glenn?
Will it change with the new punching system?
No, because we're not paying for licenses for them.
They would cost a lot of money for nothing.
Yeah, our maximum license, I think we signed up for is.
And ask if this could be digital, because then you can go into, you can, you can look at it that way, but that's quite a.
You just want an extra report, which our system can generate.
No,
It's
I
just
don't
not
need an
one
extra report. I
that,
can
you know.
still just count the total meetings and whatever. It's just flummoxed me for 30 years, how pitiful it is.
We're very archaic in our processes.
That is correct.
What's gotten me, Denise, so if you're gonna talk about that, is the fact that we get paid before a pay period is over.
Well, that's not these guys' fault.
But that's our accounting software system, and it's
Well-
just like, I know too, like. Yes, because we can only issue so many checks per
Per month.
year. Per
Per
month,
month.
okay, but then once.
What it really comes down to is it's not worth, I
That's
mean,
right.
like, I've already talked to Heidi
That's
about
all
this
self
far
charges.
longer than I should have, and we should just let it go because it doesn't really make that big a
The
difference.
cell charges you per check you write?
You get 6 pay, or
No, there's
So
explain this.
5 pay periods in a month. So you need 3 of those pay periods or check issue date sort of things to pay staff, because sometimes there are 3 payrolls for staff in a month. One is reserved for board, which we use quarterly, and then the 5th one is for any screw ups. So that you have a way to make a correction. So, yeah, that's.
anything beyond that, we pay extra.
Well, no, you can't do it. You have to wait then to the next month when there's that extra paid, that extra 5th pay
But
period.
can't we pay Cassell to change our system to allow us more checks?
Well, I'm
I
sure
thought
that there's
that
some
was-
way that they can go in and make adjustments to paid periods that have already been updated to the general letter and create an additional check, but I don't know. It's all beyond my understanding.
The system is just bad. You know, we had this conversation, Heidi and I had a conversation and Vlad about how at the end of the year, you know, like I'll give a good example of personal days. You get 3 personal days. And you want to use them up at the end of year at Christmas time. And maybe bank your PTO, because when you retire someday, you get that paid back. Well, you can't, the system doesn't let you do that, so you have to get paid out for those personal days and take them as PTO based on how things fall. It's just a messed up system. I don't understand it. I'm glad Heidi and Vlad do.
Do we use it because it's, most municipalities use it? We use it because we've always used it. We use it.
No,
we
it's
can't change it.
newer.
No,
it's newer.
no, Cassell,
We can't change it because
I
it's
don't
too
know how long
expensive.
we've had Cassell.
Oh, I remember Tasha redid the whole chart of accounts.
Multiple times she's done that. Cassell has been here as long as I've been here. I don't know what they had before.
Oh, okay.
I only know as much as I was instructed when I started.
And that's plenty.
And we've had conversations with, I think it was Adam or Amber about changing it. So Cassell is really good if you're a really big municipality. We're not.
So they specialize in municipal finance or
So
whatever
there's-
payroll.
Yeah, there's different systems out there for smaller units of government, more user-friendly, easier, but this is
But
what we
you
got.
also talked about that your old communities switched, it was a nightmare and then went back. I remember you saying that at some meeting,
We did,
because I think Amber also said something similar to
so
that.
you have to be
also.
careful on who you're going with. Our switch to a brand new platform where it looked beautiful, where every department could look at it, see exactly where they're in their budget. It was on the website. You go to, you know, the planning page and you'd see exactly where they're at in their budget and all this other stuff. It was great, but it didn't work out that way. So you have to go with one that is tried and true. And Adam, I thought it was you who had told us one that, a lot of the smaller units of government work with. But, so we pay all this money. I think I told you, they charged us, what was it, $6,000 to train you, Vlad, on how to use their system?
I think Adam just dropped out. He had to attend second meeting.
Yeah, you get charged for everything. It's terrible, in my opinion.
Your short support calls, though, are not charged. If you go over an hour, then they're charging you for your support calls.
If they call you back.
Yeah.
If a call, finally
Oh,
get
they
a
don't
call
call
back.
you, but
They're hard to get a hold
I
of.
mean, customers, that's
I'm-
terrible.
Years ago, I had asked a number of questions to Tasha about changing from Cassell. This is probably 2018, 2019. And my conclusion was like that the requirements were overly burdensome, but it didn't make sense because you're so non-standard. You end up having a lot of troubles with a lot of other things, and the amount of time that staff has been trained in Cassell, and even at that point, 6 years ago, was
It's just too painful to make a change.
Yeah, it is, because it's so intertwined,
Yeah.
it's tied into everything.
called vendor lock, something that IT does very well.
Yeah, they've made it, job security is what they made, it's too difficult to get out of at this point. Well, it's kind of the best way I can explain, without knowing the system. Like, this.
Okay, are we done?
No, you have financial contingency plan and budgeting on here
We'll talk about that next time.
next month,
Are we meeting next month?
next meeting.
That's all, and we'll see if they have to.
Well, what would be on the next agenda? What do we normally meet about in the first quarter? I
And
don't
we've
know.
never met in the first quarter. Well, I
I don't
suppose
know.
we could talk about it when we do the audit. When they present the audit.
That's in summer.
Oh, that's all the way to the summer?
The
I
auditors.
thought
are
it was,
coming
there was
first of
something in
March.
April that we always did.
Well, I guess this would be after then the board meeting would be the communication to the, if we're all in agreement that we want to communicate, do some sort of communication to our taxpayers about, I mean, if you guys don't agree with me, because I know that this was not a forum to discuss that, I mean, this isn't the time to discuss it, but, and that would be a board decision anyway, right?
One thing I want to put on for the next board meeting, if it's not too long, and actually probably just need to do at this point, is communication with public, just in general. We can certainly go down specifically to this one under that agenda item.
Right, it should, right, the board needs to.
Just in general, work on better communication with public.
Well,
And
here's the thing about communication, I think, and I don't think that the people in this room I don't think it's their fault at all. I think that in order to communicate well, you have to devote assets, people that are responsible for actually physically, I mean, so if you're gonna do a newsletter, if you're gonna, I've been through this, so we go through it at the Pulse. You know, to be able to really manage a social channel. Facebook, Instagram, whatever, or a newsletter at the SBAA. My goal was always to have a monthly newsletter. We never did it. We did it a little bit, then we stopped doing it because somebody has to own it, somebody has to come up with the content, and somebody has to bug somebody for the content. Somebody has to write it, it has to have a voice. All that stuff has to happen for it to be what it needs to be. And clearly, our administration office doesn't have the time to do that. Plus, I think that, you know, the committees are the ones that would supply information, I think. But so would parks for things like that. This is a much bigger conversation. Not a bigger conversation, but
You know, we had a village.
I know.
Oh,
Well, and I get one from Egg Harbor. I don't know who does it for them. It's very simple. It's not monthly. That's really hard. And I get them from where I used to live and stuff. I really think, I mean, some of it even could be outsourced, to be honest, like laying it out, you know, and then delivering content for it. It's kind of I think it's important. I think it's really important. I think it would go a really long way to mitigate some of the pushback that we didn't know that, we didn't hear that, we didn't, why don't you, you know what I mean? And it's also a great way, by the way, to get email addresses. Cause I mean, it's super, it's really, all I'm suggesting, Nate, is that, you know, I mean, I'm happy to be some sort of, or do some research on like, how are people doing it and what's the most efficient way to do it with the technology that's available, you know?
please, it'll be on the next board agenda, so
Okay.
if you have information you want to share at that
But
time.
we
you'll
can't
have-
lay that on, I don't think it's, feasible to lay it on the.
That about hiring new staff.
Well, or, you know, and again, you know, but we do have committees that could submit content. We do have, so but somebody has to own
See,
it
that's why the newsletter stopped,
because,
because when I did it, the committees were supposed to give me
Give content.
stories,
yeah,
write it,
yeah.
whatever. I mean, I would proof it, edit it, put it in the newsletter. I would do all of that
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
Send it off to be printed, and then the one by one, they were
stopped
not,
doing it.
they were not getting me the information. I ended up writing it, and finally I got tired of it because I
Well, it's really hard to
was
write it
doing
too.
all the work.
Well, it's really hard to write it. It's hard to write.
It's
Like,
not,
give me
it's so
50
easy.
I know that for some people it's hard. Give me 50 words. Give me 30 words. And then, by the way, images. Give me an image. Well, I don't have an image. I don't, that's, all that stuff somebody needs to own it.
And the other thing is too, it's never good enough, because I'll tell you what, so the questions I wrote down, that the public doesn't know about, you wouldn't be addressing this in a newsletter. There was the comment, I talked to people that can build that building for $2 million.
And why didn't they bid on
Why
it?
didn't they bid on it?
I know.
Why aren't you storing the stuff in the barn? Go look in the barn, the barn's packed full.
And it's unlocked. Yeah, I know.
And the other one I scribbled through here, but I mean, you can't put all that in the newsletter, you can't.
But you
So
can put
all
some
of-
things. I think it could go,
I agree.
even if it's 2 pages, like 1 page double-sided. Start there.
But you
I'm-
can't anticipate this and answer these, because, I mean, we did do press releases on the building and all
I
this
know.
other stuff.
For Heidi's sake, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn.
All right. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I was just saying, I don't think any of those people are signed up for an email blast or news.
Heidi,
Well, I gotta tell you, what would be really, really good.
Heidi, that's
is
the first
over
time I've
here
ever made a
is
motion
to
to
get
adjourn.